Thank you, Jeff. I'll call the meeting back to order. Please rise for the pledge.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'd like to welcome our guests here this evening and those that are watching. Mr. Gilberto, you want to make a...
When you're ready. Just a brief note for those who are watching at home. I'm advised by NORCAM that they've completed an upgrade to the broadcast signal to fiber optic cable broadcast, which should be resulting in digital signal coming through, and what I gather should be an improved quality of resolution in terms of what's being viewed. So if you're noticing a difference this evening, that may be the reason. I'd like to thank NORCAM for their efforts with regard to this. I know it's a multi-week task over the past few weeks to try to get it done. So thank you for that.
Thank you. We have the minutes of March 23rd, 2015, regular session. Mr. O'Leary.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the March 23rd, 2015 regular session minutes.
Second.
Motion by Mr. O'Leary, seconded by Mr. Yule. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Executive session, March 23rd. Mr. O'Leary.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve the March 23rd executive session minutes as written.
Second.
Motion by Mr. O'Leary, seconded by Mr. Yule. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. We have legal bills for February. And have a motion, Mr. O'Leary?
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve legal bills for February 2015 in the amount of $5,825.12 as follows. Copeland and Page, PC, General, $2,813.12. Copeland and Page, PC, Labor, $2,484. West, that's West Publishing, $528. Total $5,825.12.
Second.
Motion by Mr. O'Leary, seconded by Mr. Yule. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous. Is there anyone here for public comment? Moving right along. Representatives from Automatic Amusement Device License. Gentlemen?
Good evening. My name is Laurie Renasto. I work for A to Z Vending, and we have machines currently at Cowabunga's. And I'm here this evening to ask if we could increase the amount of devices there from 5 to 10.
What's Cowabunga's position on this?
They're fine. Matthew Pearson, I have a copy of a letter here from him, I think directed to the town of North Reading, requesting the same. Please let this letter as a request to increase my amusement device license from 5 to a total of 10 pieces.
Get to the packet.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Yule.
Yeah, the last time, I don't know if it was you or
I think they were
Cowabunga's.
both here.
They were both.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And if I recall, the conversation went as alluded to that this wasn't vital to Cowabunga's, and you probably weren't going to look for more. I thought you would be coming back, but you weren't going to be looking for that many more. But how many do you have there right now? 5?
We have 5
Right.
pieces,
So
yes.
if I recall, hopefully somebody on the board can refresh my memory. I thought you might come back for 2 or 3, but you weren't looking to double the amount. I don't know
Well-
what anybody else recalls, but that's what I'm recalling.
Business is good at Cowabungas, and I'll speak for A to Z vending, that business is good. And there seems to be a demand for what we're gonna be putting in are these redemption items. There'll be 2 cranes,
That's it.
the claws that come down, which we already have 2 cranes there. We have a candy crane and a capsule crane that has little toys within the capsules. Where we would like to put in a plush crane, which has stuffed toys in it, and also a ball crane, which has inflatable balls, 5-inch in diameter, so knobby balls that the kids seem to like. We've had success with them at other locations that we have. So, in addition, we'd like to put in a air hockey game. So those are 3 of the pieces. A 4th piece would be what's called a stacker, which has rods. It's an upright game encased in plastic. There's rods that are coiled. They have prizes on them, and there's a light board behind the prizes, and the person who's playing tries to manipulate the light board to get, I think there's about 8 or 10 columns of light. Tries to manipulate the board up, and the higher they get up, the higher level prize they get. And again, these are all, I know it is quite a jump.
Yeah, you're not quite answering my question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
In that sense, you're telling me what you're gonna put there, and that's fine. But I guess, I'm reaching out to the board to see what they remember. I guess, and you're not recalling it either, apparently,
Well-
that the jump would be that, double the amount. And I'm not opposed to it,
Right.
don't misunderstand me.
No.
I'm just trying to understand. The other question that I really do have is, these games that you put in there, is there a limitation in the, or a restriction into the type of games that they can put in there? That, you mentioned a few games, right?
Right.
And they all sound fine. But how far can they go without us?
All right, so I purposely stopped in there on Saturday.
Did you win anything?
Where's the candy?
I can say this, it was very, very busy. If you haven't been in there, when you walk in the door, there's a long counter, and you just can't get past where all their apparatus is. And along the left wall, on the other side of this basic wall with an electric door, there are the games. And the games occupy all the wall space, and they share it with what appear to be a bunch of bins. So.
Exactly.
And I asked, now, I didn't talk to the manager, he wasn't there. I talked to the young lady that was manning the counter, and I asked her where the new games are proposed to be, and she said along the wall, which immediately told me that they're gonna have to remove some of these, what appeared to be just racks, in order to fit the rest of the games in. And now you tell me something else, and that is, an air hockey game is gonna occupy even more space if it's up against the wall, because you gotta have room on either side of it, plus there's some length. Or they're gonna put it somewhere else where they didn't, the girl didn't know,
Yeah.
the young lady didn't know where that might be. So my concern is, what I'm concerned about is not so much the request, but after going in there, and then the manager of the place not being here tonight to explain what he's gonna do and how he's gonna fit all of this in. So I have a little concern about that. But it was clear to me that there were people using the amusement games.
Well, I definitely want you to be successful. That's not my, that's my interest. But again, the types of games, I mean, and because I don't participate in those types of games. When I did, I've always lost anyway. But what is, if we're saying he can put 10 there, what kind of 10 can he put there? I mean, what's the restriction?
Are you worried about violence? Is that what you-
I'm worried about violent games. I'm worried about games that are not appropriate for the age of the kids. Now, again, parents bring them over there, that's their business, and it's not for us to decide in that regard. But I just have a concern of the types of games, how extreme.
We have no intention of putting any gun games in there. We have, as part of our inventory, we do have big buck hunters, Terminators, which
Nice.
certainly involve, video screens and guns. It's just not appropriate for the age group that is patronizing
And what is that, by
cowabungas.
the way?
Excuse me?
What is the age group that's patronizing?
I don't know, I was just.
Aside from Bob.
Well, I'll count myself in that group as well. I just stopped by, and there seemed to be, I was just there prior to the meeting, and mostly it seemed, from toddlers to maybe 7, 8-year-old children perhaps, but they were mobile. They had a tricycle kind of track set up, and there were kids that were running around on that. But they're, it's a younger crowd, supervised by parents or guardians, whoever is bringing them in there. But we're going to make money if we have appropriate games there that the parents will allow their children to play, and we certainly want to do what's right. And if there's concerns, we could address them more. I guess one thing I'd like to address, the air hockey table. What we have done we have a couple of air hockey games in theaters, and you can put them right up against the wall. It's not like a pool table where you need 6 feet of space on either side, either end. You can actually put one long side against the wall and just, because the game is played from either end. And so that is a little less space that's taken up. Where those racks were that you noticed, I think there's a whole, where the current games are, then there's a little cut-in where there's doors going to their party rooms, and then there's another jut-out with a similar-sized wall where our games currently are.
Way in then?
Yeah, way in the back.
Okay,
in the
I
back
did
a little
not,
bit.
I have to admit, I didn't look way back there.
Yeah, so
I
they,
assume that the games are gonna go along the wall and the racks or something are gonna be removed.
yeah, I think, in my opinion, what I observed this evening was those racks can be consolidated a little bit. They're pretty spread out, and I think Matt will get them placed correctly. He doesn't want to, we don't want to interfere with the flow of patrons running around, kids running around. We want to keep the space
Yeah,
as open as
I
possible.
thought they were in a good place where I saw them, right? And that was my concern about adding more where there didn't appear to be any more space without removing the racks. But if you say there's the way I looked at it as I went down, then at the end, the wall, you're right, the wall jets in. I didn't really look way down. I know the building is fairly deep, so.
It is,
Yeah.
it is. Yeah, his games are well spaced, but, you know, where I think the games are gonna be concentrated, like I said, there's a whole another section, most likely similar sized from what I observed to where our current games are.
Any other questions, gentlemen?
No. I'm sorry, what is your name again?
My name is Laurie Renasto, and I can give you a business card, certainly.
That'd be great.
Mr. Gilberto?
Just a question. We had received, at the time we got comment from the building inspector, a notation that he would recommend that there be a cap of 10 devices at this facility with regards to the placement. Is that something that you and the proprietor are prepared to agree to?
I can't speak for the proprietor. I know that he has, I think, a clause in his lease which limits him to the amount of amusement devices he can put in there to not create a arcade, so to speak. But we will do whatever Matt Pearson, the owner, allows us to do. If he is asking, this is his request to, you know, add machines in, and we certainly would like to do that as well. But if there's limitations, I know there's a limitation on the lease, but if the town has limitations as well, if the building, you said it was the building inspector?
The building inspector, yeah.
Yeah, if there's a ruling from town that we're limited, of course we'll adhere to that. Of
Okay, thank
course.
you.
Well said.
All set? Mr. O'Leary?
Mr. Chairman, I move to amend the following automatic amusement device license to include additional automatic amusement devices for a total of 10, subject to all regulatory department requirements. Cowabunga's Entertainment LLC.
Second.
Motion by Mr. O'Leary, second by Mr. Yule. Further discussion from the board?
Yes.
Yes, Mr. Yule?
In light of the inspectors, we have a limit to 10, so never mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They'd have to come back
They'd
for
have to come
Let's
more,
come back
and
from- right, I apologize.
at that point, they probably would get denied.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
We have a show cause hearing in 4 minutes, so we just take a brief
sign that.
recess rather than attempt to do anything else.
Enough to discuss the budget.
Yeah, right. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Yule?
Question as we're waiting here. I know that the hearing is for 7:30 PM. What violation would we be in if we started 5 minutes early?
Adequate notice to the public. That's
It's a
all.
notice to the public, it's a public hearing, it's not like the Cowabunga thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was just thinking because we know it's going to go more than 5 minutes, so.
Well, it's only a couple minutes.
No, I understand.
I believe it's actually...
Don't wait until, you
It's
know,
an
a minute
educational
before to
question.
disappear.
Mr. Chairman, if I might suggest we go to 13, which is just the renewal of seasonal.
Yes,
Well,
okay,
but-
when I looked down, and
Yeah.
I thought we'd talk at length on
just-
any of the others, but that, you're right.
Okay, just
We'll
in
be back
relation
in
to
session
the,
then.
just in relation to the Thompson Club, we have a notation from the administrator's office that We're still awaiting approval for the ABCC of the paperwork that we sent in on March 24th for the change of manager, from John Wiley to Chris Young. So there are 2 licenses have been prepared. So they'll hold the one, the office will hold the one for Chris Young until they get the ABCC approval, so there'll be 2 to sign. All right? One with Mr. Wiley's name on it, and one with Mr. Young's on it. So they'll get one, and then they'll get the other one later. So, Mr. Chairman, I move to renew the seasonal wine malt beverage license for the Thompson Club Pro Shop, 2 Mid-Iron Drive, to expire December 31st, 2015, subject to all regulatory department requirements.
Second.
Motion by Mr. O'Leary, seconded by Mr. Yule. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous?
Mr. Chairman, I move to renew the seasonal common victualers license for Hillview Snacks, 149 North Street, to expire December 31st, 2015, subject to all regulatory department requirements.
Second.
Motion by Mr. O'Leary. Do we hear a second?
Mr. Yule did.
I said second.
Second? Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous?
Mr. Chairman, I move to renew the seasonal wine and malt beverages license for Golf Facilities Management, Inc., DBA Hillview Snack Bar, 149 North Street, to expire December 31st, 2015, subject to all regulatory department requirements.
Second.
Motion by Mr. O'Leary, seconded by Mr. Yule. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? And
Mr. I already got that one. Okay, we're good.
you said there's one that we have to wait, right?
Right.
Which one's that?
No, we're just gonna sign.
No, we're going
Oh.
to sign both of them, and
Oh.
the administrator's office will issue the
We'll
one
hold
that's
them.
appropriate until the
Yeah.
ABCC signs in the sign.
Oh, so he's just gonna sit on it?
There's a motion for that as well. the
Okay.
seasonal license.
This one here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Do we have
Yeah.
another one,
Here we
Steve?
have another one here, Mr. Chairman. I move to sign the ABCC seasonal license certification.
Of course.
Second.
Motion by Mr. O'Leary, seconded by Mr. Yule. I don't think there's need for discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous?
Yep.
Okay. I guess
Some of
at
these are
this
out for
point,
signature.
we can open the show cause hearing for Hess. And
Mr. Chairman,
yes,
just for the record, for the viewing public, we had originally scheduled to have this hearing to occur the same evening as we had the other 2 establishments' hearings back in March. We then, through agreement with the owner and their representation, agreed to reschedule it to April 6th, which was last night, and we provided them written notice of that. We then had a need to reschedule that evening, and by agreement between the board through its vote last night and the representative of Hess, that hearing was postponed to this evening at 7:30, which is what brings us to the presentation tonight, and I believe the chief has a presentation to make.
I don't know if you want me to go first or not, but...
yes, so why don't you read the complaint?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. In an ongoing effort to reduce the illegal sale of alcohol to people under 21, on Thursday, January 15, 2015, members of the North Reading Police Detective Unit conducted an alcohol compliance check at 231 Main Street, Hess Express. I did receive a report the next day that there was a violation of Mass General Law, Chapter 138, Section 34, sale or delivery of alcoholic beverage to a person under age, 21. The operative used by our department was 18 years old at the time. I'd like to summarize a report from Detective Thomas Hatch, which was submitted to me on Thursday, January 15th. Himself and Lieutenant Romeo conducted alcohol compliance checks while using an underage person. This was part of a statewide grant and was advertised in a local newspaper that day on January 15th, as well as advertised on our social media and North Reading Patch. Sometime during the evening hours at approximately 18:28, the underage person was given a $20 bill and told to attempt to purchase a 6-pack of Bud Light cans. The person was instructed to leave the premises if a state identification card or license was requested by the cashier. Person did enter the store, walked into Hess Express, and approximately 4 minutes later, person exited with a brown bag containing a six-pack of Bud Light cans. The officers asked the underage person who had sold them the alcohol. They identified the young cashier behind the desk, which the officers could see through the glass window. The officers went back in and informed the cashier that he had sold alcohol to a minor. The cashier identified himself as a manager. He was apologetic at the time and asked if he would be terminated. He did inform the officers he was the store manager and he should demote himself for the occurrence. The officers did afford the clerk to contact the manager, but he refused at the time.
Mr. Yule?
Yes, did I understand for you to say that there was an additional violation the next day? Did I understand that? Or was
No.
the next day that you received the notice?
I received the report the next day.
Okay, thank you.
He said he received the report. But in the report, was it the clerk on duty refused to call the manager?
Yeah, we offer him the opportunity to contact the manager so we could explain the process in the hearing that would be similar to what's going on today.
Okay.
So when I say refusal, it was just that he declined the option of calling and having us explain the process.
Okay. Who's representing Hess this evening?
Good evening, members of the board. Andrew Upton, representing Hess. With me are John Judy, the regional manager, Donna Gilberti, the general manager of the store, also Carmen Selly, the district manager, and Cindy Lewis, the senior district manager. I'd just like to read a brief statement, if it's okay with the board. Thank you for the opportunity to address the board. Hess is a nationwide gas and convenience store chain. In Massachusetts, they have 3 locations that serve alcohol. Revenues are over 90% from the sale of gasoline and food, and we don't consider ourselves a liquor store or a destination for those stocking up for events or parties. I'd like to submit some materials for the board's review, which Donna is now going to hand to the board. In it is our compliance checking service, the bars company, and evidence that the clerk who made the sale was terminated immediately. Despite the fact he was tips trained and he did score well on many of his employment tests. After I finish, these two would like to read a statement, and we, of course, will be here to answer any questions. We're not here to contest that a mistake was made. We've examined how that happened. We want to tell the board how hard we work to prevent this type of incident and how we reacted in a proactive, professional, and compliant manner. We believe that Hess provides a positive impact to the town through jobs and taxes, but Hess goes a step further through donations, charitable activities, and other activities that John will describe. Hess has extensive alcohol training program for staff and management and is regarded as a conscientious operator in Massachusetts and around the country. The company has grown to 148 locations in New England and hundreds of millions in revenue, and is known for customer service and strict alcohol compliance. According to the police report, this location has not had a violation in the last 5 years. According to management, we don't believe that this location has ever had a violation, an alcohol violation of any type. 10,000 people a week come to this store. That's over 600,000 a year, and that extrapolates to more than 3 million people in the last 5 years. While even one minor served is still one too many, we ask the board to consider the overall record when reviewing any sanctions. We ask you to consider the fact that Hess terminated the cashier immediately. Management has held supplemental training, and the fate of the cashier who failed to check the idea has been widely publicized to staff during meetings and retrainings. We take responsibility for the situation, but we hope you'll give us credit for the consistent compliance and safe service that has occurred since our opening. As you can see from the police report, the cashier was shocked and embarrassed to realize what he'd done, and he even offered to demote himself. Well, the company doesn't work that way. We think this shows how seriously both the company and the individual take the situation. Due to these facts and our extensive efforts at alcohol training and education, our discipline of the cashier, our commitment to sharpen our focus on alcohol service, including the institution of additional staff meeting and retraining of all management and service staff after the incident, we respectfully suggest that the sanction for Hess should be at the shorter end of the range for a first offense. While we defer to the judgment of this board, we would suggest that a warning would be appropriate in this instance. If the board deems a suspension the only option, we request that any days of suspension be held in abeyance, giving Hess a reasonable probationary period in which to demonstrate our commitment to safe alcohol service, as well as the opportunity to clear our record if we comply. Thank you for allowing me to describe our view of the situation. If it's okay with the board, I'd like to have the general manager and the regional manager make a brief statement.
It's okay, certainly. Name and address at the podium, please.
I'm sorry, my name is John Judy. I'm the regional manager for the New England area. I first of all want to thank all of you for the opportunity and letting us come in and speak. I've worked for the Hess Corporation for 22 years, and I personally take this very seriously when it comes to sale of restricted items to minors. Me, our team, our leadership team are very involved in this process, and I can assure you it's got the full attention of everyone in our organization. I'm here along with all of the team members within my team to come here to let you know that we realize that we did make a mistake, but I can only assure you that we are going to make all the steps necessary to correct the issue and make sure that we're good citizens of the community and doing the right thing for our communities. We take this wholeheartedly, and I've in my career, I've had a very good record of compliance with sale of restricted items. We're going to go back through. We're going to train the entire crew all over again. They've went back and redid all of their training modules, which require them, when we onboard any person into our organization, we require them to do an online training module and sign a form that kind of goes through the sale of restricted items. And we really do reinforce the policy of zero tolerance when alcohol is sold to a minor. We don't accept any excuses for that. We hold people accountable for it, and we take it extremely seriously. So again, I really would appreciate the opportunity in letting us show to the board that we can correct the behavior and get the store where it needs to be and be compliant moving forward.
Hello, my name is Donna Gilberti, and I'm the site manager. I live in Amesbury, Mass. It's an unfortunate circumstance that occurred, and I'm taking every step to make sure it doesn't happen again. As John has mentioned, we have gone back and gone through our web-based training with our employees. I'm constantly watching and listening to them as they help customers. They do know that with me, it's a zero tolerance. If you do not ask for any type of an ID, you will not have your job. I think they realize that because this person that we had to let go was a decorated Marine who just came home from Afghanistan. And again, you can't, whoever it was, you can't jeopardize someone's life just because you don't ask for an ID.
Okay.
Thank you.
A real concern to this board associated with selling alcohol to minors is that our police department runs, I think it's a semi-annual event, and they post it in the paper, and on that evening, or that period of time that they ran it, there were 3 violations in town. And that's a real concern to the board. It's a concern to the board because it sort of suggests that somehow, and we've heard the story from the other 2 companies that sell alcohol in the community. They've done the training and they're all concerned and cautious about it. But it wasn't an 18-year-old kid that looked like a 24 or 25-year-old kid. It was a young kid. And to me, that's a big problem. And as a result, we have taken steps to what we believe to be a reasonable penalty associated with a first violation. And I don't know if the rest of the board members want to weigh in, but it seems to me that it's got to be more than just training the individuals. It's got to be, a refresher course every year or every period of time so that people don't forget. I think it's easy in the course of a lot of people coming in and out of the store maybe to forget, but that can't happen. Mr. O'Leary.
Mr. Yule.
Oh, Mr. Yule, I'm sorry.
It's a very difficult task, businesses like you have, to stay on top of it day in and day out. We understand that. And as Mr. Masuri said, sometimes I think people in your, companies in your position need to, maybe on a quarterly basis, do something to try and stay on top of the game. Because it's very hard. Every time you hire somebody you have to go through a whole process. And I understand that, and I can be sympathetic to that. But when this event took place and we had 3 violations, the big question comes up, well, when we don't do the event, how many violations do we have? It's concerning. Usually, you get one and you're happy and you deal with it, but 3 in one evening, when it's been publicized and so on. So, in that regard, that's a big concern that we have. I take the position that even though you haven't had one in 5 years or 10 years or what have you, we can't unfortunately rely on that. Okay, and I look at it, it's a violation, and we have somewhat of a standard of 3 days, and we should probably stick to the 3 days for not being allowed to sell alcoholic beverages. In your case, it's not a big revenue producer. I think if I understood you earlier, so it wouldn't have that much of an impact on you, but it does have an impact on the town, and that's the concern that we have. So I think that we need to go in that direction, as we have in the past with other violators. Thank you.
May I add something to what I was wanted to let you guys know?
Yeah, just,
Actually,
please get up.
you can move the mic over maybe or something.
Yeah, I could do that, sure.
There you go.
We also do a program called BARS. I don't know if many of you are familiar with the program. The BARS program is where we do mystery shops in site 2 times a month. And that site has passed all of its visits where this is an outside service that comes in and does mystery and conducts mystery visits to ensure that we are adhering to those policies and practices. I do want to reiterate, I'm new to the area. I came from Florida. And in my 22 years, I never had situations like this pop up. And all I can do is beg and ask and say, I will assure to you that this will not go on. I'm going with my team now and the things that we're looking at right now and the behaviors, I personally do not stand for it. It's something that I do take very near and dear to my heart, and I can assure you will be fully addressed. We're not going to, as we said, we're going back through and having everybody go back and watch training videos. We're having them sign documents every week to go back through to remind them. We lost that person that was mentioned, the Marine that we have in that location. He was a manager in training. And as much as we didn't want to let him go, we adhere to our policies, and we did have to let him go. And it was a shame that he did that. So, and again, we want to protect and make sure that we're selling to people and selling to folks in the community that are authorized to purchase. We're not going to stand for this, and I just want to reiterate that. So I appreciate you letting me at least mention that.
Mr. Fode?
Thank you. There's no doubt in my mind, anyway, that there's sincerity that you're placing here today. I wholeheartedly believe everything you're saying. I've read the program, the BOS program, very impressed by it. Problem is, you're not there, all day. You're not there from the minute it opens and the minute it closes. And just as you mentioned that, you guys have a policy and you terminated an employee who you thought was a very good employee, I think we kind of set a policy already, maybe an unwritten policy, when we set the bar on what we were gonna do with the other two businesses that were before us for the same infraction. So as much as we all appreciate the businesses in town, because I think, you kind of encompass a community for us too, I mean, you provide a service to us as we provide a service to you. I think the parameters that we've already set on the other two kind of bind us in this situation also.
Just, you stated that, how long has the BOS program been in place with the store here in North Reading?
We've had that, I believe, for a little over 2 years. Cindy?
I put that in place about 6 years ago. We started out with bars. We started out with C-checks, which is another compliance program, went to bars, so it's been about 6 years for the whole company.
And as far as through the 6 years, you haven't come across any occurrences? Nobody's got the red card instead of the green card,
No, we're not saying across the 149.
No.
For this one, not that I'm aware of. We pulled back for the past year. Right, we did. We had bars send us a report to say how this store, because usually I'll go back with the store that's being looked at.
And again, I understand the BOS program, again, is a program that you have to pay for, to have it done. It's an outfit that provides the service to test people, which is a good thing, and you'd be commended for that. The other thing I'd like to mention, though, is that I appreciate your presence here, all of you. It sends a very strong message, at least for me as a member of the board, of the seriousness that you're taking in relation to what occurred. I also recognize that it's a difficult thing to police on a regular basis, and the burden is still upon you to do so and do it well. I wasn't here for the first meeting, but I mean, so I tend to be maybe a little bit more tolerant through a process where, one strike, two strikes type situation. I do believe that a suspension is in order. I think it's appropriate. I think it's incumbent upon us, in the positions that we sit as the licensing authority, to send a strong message. And I think the point that the chairman made in relation to the publicity that surrounds the stings twice a year, the program that's being implemented twice a year is hard to ignore. It's not like the police department's out there trying to catch anybody in the process of something. They're going to warn you. They have warned you. They do it publicly, and then they tell you when the time period's going to be. So I think it's warranted a suspension, and I'll be supporting some sort of a suspension of your license. But again, I do appreciate the strength of the team that's here, and that you are present here tonight to convey to us the seriousness that you've taken with the matter here, and I'm noting it. Thank you for that.
Any other comments from the board?
Yeah, if I may, just going in the back of my mind, I know you have to, for lack of a better description, put up a good front by saying we fire the person, okay? And I always find that in the back of my mind, and this is no criticism of you at all, that it's sad that when someone does make a mistake, they pay such an ultimate price and they lose their job when it could be turned into a learning experience. And especially when it's you said the gentleman was a decorated Marine. I mean, this is not fun for someone like that individual to come back and make a mistake, and with all that he's probably been through, to have something like this impact him. And I do feel very bad about that, in this role. I mean, I guess there's nothing we can do, at least not from our end, but I don't weigh heavily in my thoughts that whether someone is, they have to be fired to show that you're serious about it. It all depends on the individual and so on. But that's just something that just kind of gets stuck in my mind about people losing their jobs rather than getting a learning experience on it, so. Guess we need
The
a
concern
motion.
of the board is, just one individual, once someone under age manages to buy some alcohol and gets inebriated and then goes off and kills somebody, I mean, these are the kinds of things that, this type of incident can lead to. Fortunately, in this particular case, it didn't, and that's why we do run these programs on an annual basis or biannual basis. And the fact that we publish it, and then we get 3 in one night, just doesn't give me, and shouldn't give anybody, the warm feeling that our establishments are doing all that they can. And as a result, I think the penalties that we've given to the previous 2 needs also to be given to Hess. And I would entertain a motion to that effect. I don't recall the dates that we had put together, Steve.
Well, I think the motion that's being, let's see. Okay. I don't think, did we have any suggested dates, Michael? Leave it up to the discretion of the board.
Just for the record, the prior suspensions were for April 16th, 17th, and 18th.
But we're delaying, right, we're delaying the suspension,
We-
so
we-
it
but
would
that-
make sense to.
But that's based upon,
That's
that's based upon what
That was
their
based
reaction is
on-
going to
Yep.
be,
Okay.
you know?
That they've appealed to the
Okay.
ABC.
Right.
You know,
So let's
Yeah.
stick with those dates and
What was it, April what?
16th,
16,
17th,
17,
and 18th.
18.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, sir.
I don't know if you're asking for our input, but obviously, as a business, we would prefer less busy days for the suspension. Because if we're suspended on, say, a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, not only do we lose revenue from alcohol, but then people who come in don't buy the ancillary products, they don't come back the next day. So the busier day you give us, the more impact it has on the bottom line, the jobs, the taxes, and the operation of the
I
business.
think we specifically picked those days, knowing that those are the busy days.
16, 17,
That's
Mr.
it.
O'Leary, are you,
Well, yeah, I just was gonna look at the calendar,
It's Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Yeah. The only other question I would have to the licensee is, would it be your intention to appeal the suspension to the ABCC?
I think that's probably something I'd have to discuss with the corporate counsel.
Mm-hmm. You haven't had those discussions yet, you don't know yet?
Well, perhaps it was my unwarranted optimism before I got here. I didn't realize that the suspension would be quite so severe.
Okay.
Well, Mr. Chair, just so you understand, we need to be consistent in what we do. It would be inappropriate for us to, same event, same circumstances, come up with different results. That would be inappropriate, especially at this point, since we've already have done, had hearings prior to this on the other two establishments.
Well, I certainly understand your position, but it's our goal here, and, you know, I'm not aware of the circumstances of the other licensees, but our goal here is to show you that the effort we make, the mitigation we undertake, the compliance programs and strategies, and the responsibility we take, I would hope would show you that perhaps this defendant deserves a less severe punishment than the others.
Well, they all said the same show, okay? They've all come up and said the same thing. They're all going through the same process. The owners have come, the managers have come. Now, you've had a greater presence with your employees, but they've all come and said that we're doing everything possible. Just by the example with the bars program that is, but 6 years ago, you know, as I said, it's very difficult for you to stay on top of this whole thing. And to be quite frank with you, unfortunately, it could happen another 3 years from now. All right, but what we need to do is to make sure that the community hears that the Board of Selectmen are protecting their children, protecting their young. And we really don't have a choice in that regard. It's just very important to us to make sure that we make that stand. So hopefully, the next time this happens, there's no violations. So we have a different vantage point than you do, and we understand your intentions, and you need to understand our intentions. They're both the same, to stop this from happening.
Absolutely.
Mr. O'Leary, I think that by setting those 16th, 17th, and 18th, if they decide to appeal to the ABC, we will be notified, and then we will do what we did for,
But I think time might be an issue with that, because we don't have another meeting
Do not, no.
prior to that date, so I think
oh, I see what
I
you're
think we
saying.
need to put a stipulation maybe in the motion that says if they,
We can move it out to May.
Right, okay,
You
you
know,
just change the
I,
dates. Yeah.
Again, I think we need to allow the
I agree.
licensees an opportunity to,
I-
whatever due process is available to them, and in conjunction with our meeting schedule,
I agree.
as
Yeah.
opposed to ABCC's meeting schedule, but, so, why don't we suggest May 14, 15, 16?
Okay.
Huh?
Yep.
So it's-
That work for your schedule?
That provides you the opportunity, if you decide to appeal, and we get notified, we will postpone those dates until after the results of, after an ABC ruling. Follow me?
If you decide.
As I understand it, there's a 5-day appeal period. So if today is the,
No, the
There's a-
issue is
The issue is-
that
You have to appeal it in 5 days,
You have
but
to appeal it,
you
but
can't get a, you
you
can't
won't,
get
you
a,
won't get
you'll
a
get a hearing
hearing
until
for,
August.
your hearing's not till it's
right,
months
but
out.
wouldn't that stay the suspension?
No.
if you appeal?
No, it has to come back to us.
No, it has to
and
come
still
back to
has.
the board to take action to postpone.
However.
we have to know that you've
on those
made
days,
an
no.
No,
appeal.
let them make a decision.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, the filing of the appeal by you does not stay the execution of the suspension. So,
So then what would happen if we win the appeal?
if you win the appeal, then it doesn't happen. What would happen is you file the appeal, you need to come back to the board and ask for us to postpone that action until after the ABCC hearing, which we have done in one instance and will probably do in a second this evening.
So we're giving you the opportunity,
Unless you decide to just take it and move on.
it's up to you.
Could I ask the chair for a brief recess to discuss this with my client?
We can.
Again,
Yeah.
you know, unless you're offering to make some sort of a counter proposal whereby you wouldn't, you would agree not to appeal the suspension and take one, you know, take a suspension of something different.
Oh.
But
Mr. Chairman? If I may?
If you'd like to step out and talk to your client, there's no problem.
Thank you, and we won't be long.
We can either table the matter for a few minutes and go on with our agenda, or if you're only gonna be 2 minutes, we'll wait.
You get 2 minutes.
2 minutes, okay.
We probably shouldn't be coaching them. I don't know if we should be coaching them.
it's not a coaching, I mean,
No,
no, it's just letting them know what their
Options
options are and what our reaction would be or has been. I mean,
We-
you already
we-
told them
we
what
didn't- We didn't let the others know their options.
Because we didn't know at that time that
We didn't know they were gonna-
that the appeal process was gonna
Fine.
take so long.
and we didn't know
Now
that they
we
were
know
actually
that,
going to appeal it.
and when we got word they appealed, we
Right.
suspended the.
So the process should be the same with them. We just tell them the dates of the 15,
Right, but
16, and 17.
I think they may be deciding not to bother to appeal. Costs money to appeal to.
But they can change their mind tomorrow and do it.
Yep.
Right?
And then, yeah, we can also not agree to it.
Yeah, but the risk there is if we close a business down for 3 days and they win an appeal and they already had been closed down, we might be in a legal situation, a lawsuit.
No. You know, there are businesses in the community that made a mistake, and I think we should give them the ability to due process.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm not disagreeing with that. But we're doing something a little bit different with them than the others.
Should take a different approach.
Are we back in session?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, my client is anxious to comply with the board's wishes and to get this process behind us so we can focus on compliance that matters at the store. We're wondering if the board would consider imposing a 2-day suspension, perhaps even with the 3rd day held in abeyance, if we agreed, A, to serve it in April, and B, not to appeal.
I don't know if I'm comfortable making deals.
So it's an all or possibly nothing scenario. That's what he's proposing. It's an all or
Again,
possibly nothing.
Generally, when there's an ABCC hearing, an appeal, you know, we send town administrator to town council. Members of the board have been present to also testify as to what our thought process has been through the dealings and why we doled it out. So, again, time is money to everybody. I, for one, am not opposed to considering taking some punishment, holding the 3rd day in abeyance, you know, pending a 6-month time period. In return, not having to send town council, town administrator, maybe representatives of this board to the ABCC. Still a 3-day suspension, subject to check and making sure that they comply.
I certainly agree with Mr. O'Leary, and I'd like to characterize this more as an effort by us to take responsibility to get this process done and get it over with than some type of threat to drag out the process legally.
Yeah. In return, these other, and again, as I explained earlier, in our earlier meetings, is that these licensees have the opportunity to go before the ABCC, and even if our decision is upheld, they have the opportunity to pay a fine in lieu of suspension and never close the door anyway. So that, while we are taking a strong stand, we're really not closing them down for 3 days necessarily unless they make a business decision to do so.
Mr. Yule?
Yes, and in your infinite wisdom, that fine is determined by the ABCC, I would assume?
Right.
And who is that paid to?
State.
To the state. So we see no,
We don't see anything.
Benefit out of it.
And again, there's no benefit either.
there's no benefit to us. Even if we win, we lose under that scenario.
Which is pretty much what has occurred many times, several times in the past, where fine in lieu of suspensions have been paid and the establishments have never shut down. It's based on a formula of income, which is provided by the licensee to the state.
So if our goal is to shut somebody down, I hate to use that term, this is really the better option for it to.
Well,
I
I
don't,
guess.
I don't think our goal is to shut someone down. I think our goal is
No,
to make
I
sure
don't mean
that we
that.
don't have this that
Right.
same
Yeah,
situation
that's
occur again
that's the
going
goal,
forward.
but this is the means to that
Right,
end.
that being said, Mr. Chair, I appreciate the effort, and as Mr. O'Leary pointed out, I think you brought a team with you who is sincere and all that. The problem I have is, the other two businesses that had the same situation didn't get that benefit, so I can't vote in favor of it. Doesn't mean I don't support you guys and think you're doing a great job, I just can't support it, I'm sorry.
Of course, it doesn't mean they didn't have the opportunity to
To be creative.
suggest it.
Yeah,
think of it.
you're right,
Yeah.
you're right.
But they can also still come back and make the suggestion too, right?
No, I think it creates a conundrum for us because you got potentially the other two making an appeal based on the decision that we made. And now we have this,
We
which
have
just
this.
creates a.
What is, again, what is our goal? Our goal is to have compliance within the community and keep the
Right.
community safe. Our goal is to send a message to these business establishments that we're serious about it. Our goal is to, again, as the police department has done, to advertise that we're going to, seek compliance through these operations. And when they've come up
And
short,
I-
there's gonna be a punishment associated with it.
Right.
Now, the punishment that we dole out, there'll be a 3-day suspension, 2-day suspension, a week, whatever it's gonna be, again, is subject to an appeal. And through that appeal process, they have the right to basically buy their way out of it with the state. Does that really send the same message? Is that really what you're looking to accomplish? And that's rhetorical. I'm not sure. To me, we're looking to send a message. I think we're sending it. At the same time, I recognize and appreciate, what these business establishments have to go through in order to try and maintain compliance, and nobody's gonna be 100%. And overall, yeah, we had 3 non-compliant situations, one evening. But at the same time, we've had, years that have gone by where we've had everybody in compliance. We've had some of these establishments that, 1984 for Eastgate Liquors, it was their last one that they got caught up in. I don't recall, Hess, and I don't know how long Hess has been here, but it's probably been 15 years or more.
10 years with alcohol.
Right, and, we haven't had a situation. I think part of it is the compliance program that they have. One thing that we did see here this evening was them at least, telling us so, that this is what they buy into, they pay for in order to maintain compliance on their own. They come in with a strong team. To me, I think we're sending a strong message. I'm not looking to shut down our businesses, I'm not looking to inconvenience the public, but I am looking to just send a strong message that we're looking for compliance. I think if they're willing to accept a suspension and actually shut down, that's pretty good. And hold the 3rd day in abeyance. And again, that would fall within a 6-month time period, probably when the police department's gonna go out and do it again, or maybe we could test them on our own again. I think it's a fair offer on their part to embrace what the board is trying to do. the message that we're trying to convey, at the same time, maintain their business and standing in the community. So I don't have as much of a problem as some other members might. Looking at the reality of the situation where they could actually appeal it, and even if our decision is upheld, buy the way out of it. Where we have to expend more resources to go in and defend our decision. So,
I just think it's, one of the other firms goes to ABC with news that we've provided, asked with a little different.
they asked us for this proposal, they put forth a proposal to
Mhm.
comply with the 3-day suspension with, we said 3 consecutive days, they're proposing two consecutive days in April, so that's even, before we even meet again, so they're looking to shut themselves down, and then 6 months, hold the 3rd day for 6 months, and allow us to go back and test them again or not test them again, but they know that they're on notice.
All right. Are you making a motion?
I'm just discussing it. And again, if there's no support, there's no support. If there is support,
Well,
Mr. Yule?
Mr. Chair, Steve makes a lot of good and valid points on the issue. If our purpose is to prevent minors from purchasing alcohol, and an establishment comes forward and says, we're more willing to accept a 2-day, consecutive day suspension versus appealing it and us not achieving our goal because the establishment will remain open, all right? And if they accept the fine in lieu of suspension, then I would have to concur with what Steve was saying at this point. We're getting we're achieving our goal, and they're coming forward and stopping the sale of liquor for two consecutive days. So we're achieving what we want to achieve. Otherwise, we may make the statement, but we will not achieve the goal. So I think Steve and I are on the same page in that regard.
Someone want to make a motion?
okay.
The
Chief?
Chief, yes.
Just want to make one comment. The day in advance, I'm a little confused over that.
Yeah.
Because if we do compliance checks and there's another violation, it'll be a second offense.
Plus, whatever we penalize for the second, they'd add that additional day.
Yeah, I just think
I think
I'm just,
progressive discipline.
I would like, and I'm just gonna make a suggestion, maybe a donation to Students Against Drunk Driving as opposed to the day in advance, because I think the day in advance it's unenforceable. I would assume that if there were a second violation, the penalty would be much stronger.
That's all.
Absolutely.
Without a
I'm
doubt.
Right.
I'm not suggesting that they make the donation, but I just think maybe working it a little bit, as opposed to just holding a day, which probably will not be enforced.
Right. It would be
Just as-
It would be very difficult, or maybe not even legal, to apply one offense to another offense, correct?
Well, that's why I'm trying to say, it's,
We can do it,
you can't go
Without-
back and charge them for the one day, because you're
Right.
gonna be dealing with the second offense at that point.
Right.
And it does not make sense.
right, yeah.
Whether or not the board feels that that's appropriate, I can tell you that it is common practice. If you held the day in advance for 6 months, and in 5 months and 28 days, there was a violation, that day in advance would automatically be applied. They'd have to serve that day, and then you would have another hearing on the second offense, where you would apply your matrix and your range of offenses to that one. So, I mean,
Don't see the benefit to the community.
right, it may not be good, but it would work.
Well, it would work, I just don't see the benefit to the community.
Fair enough.
Right. So, a donation.
And when I said donation, I'm just trying to come up with different ideas, so I see the board's trying to work with the company. But as Mr. Yule said before, the person that sold this, they took harsh action against him. They fired him. And If we do not, the compliance check, you know, we did not find a violation that night, he would still be working today. And he could have learned a lot from this as well, but they took that harsh action against him, and he had no choice. He had no options, he had no negotiating powers with them. So I just wanna, and I know Mr. O'Leary is saying that there's an appeal process. Essentially, it's the facts of the case that are gonna be brought to appeal, not how you guys handled the suspension. You've set the groundwork for the suspensions at this point. So it's gonna be based upon the facts of the case. Was the penalty too harsh for what the occurrence was? And you've already set that groundwork. We had, back in October, we had another violation, and they served their 3-day suspension. So I just wanna let the board know, I've been through the process, the appeal process at the ABCC. Essentially, it's the facts of the case.
I would just add that Hess is a very charitable, community and civic-minded organization. So if there was some appetite for something in that direction, we'd certainly be interested in considering it.
As we started talking about the ABCC, the fine going to them, it may be something that the board can look at down the road as well.
So I interpret what you're saying is that consistency is important.
I think it is.
As do I.
And I'm not trying to change mine, I'm just trying to
Yeah,
change
no,
the
that's fine,
different
that's fine.
philosophy of how they, you know, and I agree, the businesses are very important to the community, but each one of them has come in essentially throwing the sword in front of you, and I get it, but it's too late. You know, a lot of companies are doing this for liability purposes too. They have to do this. It's not as if they're volunteering to do this. This is something they have to do in order to not only keep their license, but for, like I said, liability purposes as well. So if I owned a business, I'd be in here probably doing the same exact thing. But I would expect that I'd be held accountable as well for very similar offense that occurred back in October and the two that you had before you about a month ago, so.
Chief, thank you for your input. Very helpful. To me.
I'm reading that we have, with only 4 members here,
Well,
the board is split.
Maybe not.
Maybe not. Okay.
I hate when I get last-minute information that adds to common sense, okay? I mean, I can't dispute what the chief just said. I mean, what Steve said, very valuable, very important. In many respects, I appreciate that perspective. Hearing the chief, what he just said, okay, is very important as well, if not more so. So I think we should stay the course. Okay, I know I'm changing, vacillating, whatever you want to call
Entertain a
it.
motion.
So,
If it doesn't come from Mr. O'Leary,
Yeah,
it'll
I'd like to
come
make
from
a motion.
Mr.
It's a-
Yule or Mr. Fode.
okay,
Put you there. Well, I crossed it up, but
so we're going to use
May
the
4th
days of,
May 14th, 15th, and 16th, I believe.
okay, Mr. Chairman, we're going to use 3 consecutive days on
May 14th, 15th, and 16th. Everyone's crossed out.
5, 14,
Mr. Chairman?
and 16, and
16.
Well, I think that our offer was constructive, fair, and reasonable. It would make a difference to Hess to serve the suspension in April rather than May, just because of their business cycle.
so you would want us to do April, the original days, 14th, 15th, and 16th.
You're getting some nods there.
Is that right? So, May
We can entertain that.
14, 16,
16th, 17th.
Okay, 16th, 17th, and 18th. Okay. All right.
3 consecutive days, I know.
Yeah, the days, 3 consecutive days. Oh, is this the establishment here? Days on, that's the,
Okay, I'm sorry, yep.
I thought so.
Yep,
No,
so it's
April
April. 14th, 15th,
No, 16th, 17th, and 18th.
16th,
If that's the board's desire,
17th.
which is what was used previously.
and
Yeah.
18th,
Right.
okay? Please close of business on April 15th. Pick up the police station on
The last day.
the 19th.
19th.
Mr. Yule.
Mr. Chairman, I move to suspend for 3 consecutive days on April 16th, 17th, and 18th the wine and malt beverage license of Hess, 231 Main Street, and that the license must be delivered to the North Reading Police Department at the close of business day on April 15th and picked up at the police station on April 19th, 2015. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. Yule, second by Mr. Fode. I think we've had enough discussion.
No, I'd actually like to have a little more discussion in relation to this, because again, I'm not going to support the motion, because I think, and again, I apologize, I wasn't able to get to the meeting early enough for the first hearing, because I think we would have had this discussion earlier. And maybe it would have influenced people's minds, and maybe it wouldn't have. But to me, I think it's important for this board to send strong messages in relation to this type of activity, and I think we're doing that. But I also think we need to keep it local if we can. You know, they have the right to appeal, but I think we need to entice our local businesses to accept the suspensions that the board's going to dole out, have something that be message sending, but reasonable. Again, the business community is very important to us, but compliance is too. And I think, what was being proposed here this evening was a reasonable approach to accepting a responsibility for what took place, and also, again, allowing the town to send a strong message and also save resources without having to necessarily go into Boston and with council and members of the board and the town administrator and the chief of police. So I think it's a reasonable approach that we should be able to handle locally, and going forward, if the majority of the board supports this, I think we should really take a good, hard look as to what our position should be and policy should be in addressing this type of a situation locally as best we can. So that being said, I'm going to oppose the motion as it's written, but I don't want anybody in the public to misunderstand that as being soft on what's occurred, because again, back to the point where adequate notice was given to all these establishments and they need to have compliance. So, I understand.
Mr. Fode.
And I don't disagree with anything that Steve just said. I do, and I believe if you were part of the original discussion that occurred with the other 2 establishments, that maybe the outcome would have been different. My only problem is I feel that we had 3 establishments that had the same offense on the same night, and I think we have to be fair to all 3, and I can't vary from what we originally had done for the other 2. That's the only issue. And I do agree, had you probably been here, maybe things would have been a little bit different.
And I have no problem with reviewing and,
Good.
And I agree,
Review
going
the
forward, we
policy,
should
Steve.
maybe reconsider how we do things.
okay, on the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Motion carries 3-1. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry about the desolation.
No, I understand. No problem.
Before we discuss the
Somebody
budget, do we
complains.
want to just knock off some of these other
Sure.
things quickly?
What do we have?
Michael, is
Sure.
that okay?
Next item 9.
Which is consideration request to delay the suspension of Tedeschi food.
Mr. Chairman, I move to delay the suspension of the wine and malt beverage license of Tedeschi Food Shops, 202 North Street, until after the ABCC appeal hearing.
Second,
Motion by Mr. O'Leary, seconded by Mr. Yule. Any discussion?
yes.
Mr. Yule?
How do we know that they've made the suspension? The last time we discussed this, I'm sorry, that they, I'm sorry, that made the
Did they
suspension,
appeal?
made the appeal. We don't really
We were
know
notified.
that they made
Yeah,
the appeal.
we get notified.
We get notified that they made an appeal?
Yeah, we've not received notice of the appeal from any of the establishments, to my knowledge.
We do get notified, though.
We do?
We do, we receive a
Yeah.
notice that they've
Yeah.
appealed.
That they've appealed.
Once they've filed.
So
the-
the
I don't know
per-
how long after they appeal it, it's sent,
Yeah.
but we would receive.
The purpose of the suspension, now, they've got 30 days, right?
I believe they have 5 days.
5 days.
Oh, 5 days.
So,
So we should make an inquiry then,
yeah, because
because if
they don't.
they've requested it, which would suggest, excuse me.
Yeah.
If they've suggested it, what we're doing is just delaying the suspension. If we find out that they haven't appealed, at our next meeting, we'll set the dates,
Right.
reset the dates. On the motion, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? Okay, my understanding is the vehicle use policy we're going to pass over this evening?
Yes, we did get comments back from town council, and again, I'd like the board members to have an opportunity to read them. I
Okay.
don't believe that they're substantive, but
The cell phone policy?
that is prepared for
Okay.
action on the first reading. Again, just to be clear, this has been reviewed by town council, and the process that we would be following is after the approval of the first reading tonight, that we would be discussing the implications with the affected employees prior to the implementation. So again, it is a proposed policy for implementation on July 1st. After those discussions have been concluded, it would come back to the board for second reading and approval.
So, have you received any input from Michael? Written?
I don't believe that he had any comment on that policy. I believe that he did.
He had something on the vehicle. right?
Yeah.
No, there was some, I thought I saw something related to, no, I'm sorry, it was the vehicle, definitely was the vehicle. Does anyone have any input into the proposed first reading of the cell phone policy?
Just the initial reaction, Mr. Gilberto, from those affected? Some pleased, some not so
I
pleased,
mean,
right?
I think that that's a fair way to classify it. It's a circumstance where some individuals will see that what they've been receiving will be reduced. There are others, and it came up during the course of the budget discussions, where there are some who actually would see an increase. But the one thing it will do is achieve equity across the board in terms of how the allowances are provided.
And again, just from a dollar and cent standpoint and transparency reasons, what's being proposed is, amongst other things, is for those that utilize their own phone, a $25 monthly stipend, and if they have a data plan, $50 monthly stipend
That's correct.
for personal use of phone as opposed to the town providing a phone.
That's correct. We did change the amount. We had it at $40, but based on the board's comment in the last reading of the last review of the policy, we increased it to $50. We did pursue the issue with regard to insurance, which was brought up. I believe that may have been brought up by Selectman Prisco, and it was determined based on the recommendation of our carrier, which is Verizon, that it was not a worthwhile investment, because when we go to pay the replacement cost of the phone, we don't pay the new retail amount, we pay a fixed amount that's lower than that. And I look to the finance director to make sure that that's correct.
So if a employee individual elects to use his personal cell phone,
Mm-hmm.
right, they automatically get that stipend.
If there's a justification provided that
okay,
says
that's what I
that it's
wanted.
required for a town.
Yeah, there's a justification form.
Yes.
And
I
so,
just
Michael,
wanna-
the department head, or the person supervisor, or the person themselves fill out the justification and sends it to you?
I believe that the form requires that the justification comes approved by the department head to
Okay.
the town administrator. But this wouldn't be a situation where the employee would be appealing directly to the town administrator, it would go to the department head. If that's not clear on the form, we'll make that correction for the second reading.
I just don't see where it says it goes to the department. I don't know if the department head should sign it first and then go to you?
That would be my expectation, and that's how we handle nearly every other transaction form relative to employees.
Okay.
Mr. Yule?
Yes, Mike, is that do we have a policy, a procedure, I should say, in place where certain steps like this, depending on the person's level, employment level, goes through the supervisor, goes through the director and so on before it comes to you? Is there something edged in stone in that regard?
I can't say that every type of personnel transaction is etched in stone, but broadly, the processes are generally covered by an employee transaction form, which is generated by the department head and reviewed by the finance department, reviewed by the human resources administrator, and then submitted to the town administrator for approval. That's broadly how we handle any type of adjustment. I think where the issues have come up in the past is there hasn't necessarily been a policy document to guide those
Right.
transactions. So it's been hard when we review them in budget sessions to determine where the amounts came from and why they differ across the board. So the policy is intended to address that and make it consistent.
Thank you.
So a question that I have is related to the control of someone that's using a supplied phone by North Reading. So there's a cost associated with that phone. And as we all know, there are limits typically on data usage, texting. What do we do in the case of somebody that may be in the process using it for personal use and runs up an excessive
Sure.
data bill?
So this was something that was identified by the finance director as we were putting the policy together, if I recall, and Liz, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the system that we have intend to have in place is that there would be an independent audit outside of the department occurring in the finance office with regard to the expenses to determine if there's an abuse that's occurring. But I'll defer to the finance director.
Okay, so we're not getting, the phones issued by the town are not set to some limit. They're unlimited, and then we're going to have to monitor and order their use.
I believe the
Audit
plan
the
is
use.
unlimited, but I defer to the finance director.
Currently, the town has several Verizon wireless plans. So, you know, there could be, say, the building department that has 4 phones on one account. Then you have the police department that has, you know, over, I don't know, maybe 30 phones total on their plan. So the goal would be, once this policy is implemented, to have everybody on one account where you would have a total pool of minutes and data and, you know, all of that would be split amongst all of the lines that are currently in use. It would be more advantageous for the town to have them all on one account, and, you know, we would divvy up the bill according to, you know, which departments have X amount of phones on that particular,
So,
bill.
so the data, in the case of, you know, a data plan, the town has a single data plan of X number of megabits or gigabits of data. And as long as we don't exceed that in any given month, then the bill is what it is.
Right.
So a particular user of the phone, one user could be way in excess, but it doesn't hit the ceiling because the rest of the users are well below whatever we plan to be on average
Right.
for a data plan.
That's typically what we see happening. You know, you'll have, say, in DPW, you'll have maybe 4 heavy users, which happen to be, you know, maybe the director and the foreman and the water superintendent, and then, you know, the other DPW employees that have phones might only use 4 minutes a month and, you know, no data. So they're giving their data to the pool and it's being split amongst the, we don't see data overages, we don't see really minute overages, we'll see very few, some people will still call 411, so, that's one of the things that we're training employees to not do that. But we monitor the invoices, we audit the invoices every month, so if there's something on the bill that
So
hasn't
you-
been approved.
So even though we have a fixed data plan that covers everybody, we do get individual data on each phone.
Yes, exactly, yeah, it's broken out by phone number.
Okay.
You get one summary page,
Mm-hmm.
and then you get it by, each phone line.
So you get a breakdown, okay.
Yes, yep.
All right.
So
then,
once we go to having a uniform policy, we will
Mhm.
look at all of the different accounts that we currently have with Verizon, speak with our Verizon government rep, and see what the best plan is for us. It may be to stay, have two separate accounts and split them, or it may just be to put them all pooled in one. We've had some discussions, and until this is put in place, we haven't made a decision, so.
do they have any way of flagging certain parameters on the bill, so you get a red flag on a particular phone? Do you know?
I'm sure there are, controls in place, and if we have only one bill coming to the town and, one person monitoring it, it will be easy for us to do that.
Okay.
Currently, we don't get all the bills at the same time, so we're looking at, a Verizon bill 1 week, and then 2 weeks later, we
Okay.
have another one, so, this will create uniformity for us.
Thank you. Any other comments regarding this for first reading?
Mr. Chairman, I move to accept the first reading of the cell phone policy.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous? Thank you, Michael. Okay, so now we'll go back to the budget. And then we'll go through the, see if I got everything else, the town meeting articles.
Mr. Chairman, you can sign those.
Oh, yes,
Great,
sure.
thank you.
Joe?
So just a quick presentation on the FY16 budget that I threw together on some key factors, the revenue plan, and a few items. So this is just a snapshot of the FY16 revenue plan compared to FY15. We also are passing around the full FY16 revenue plan, and I also have that to present.
You want me to work this way?
So, as I was saying, it's just a snapshot of the key revenue drivers in the revenue plan. We have the detailed revenue plan that's been handed out, and I'll put that up on the screen once we go through these slides. You can see the differences that are taking place between FY15 and FY16. You'll also note that on this slide, under state aid, unrestricted, and Chapter 70 state aid, those figures have been adjusted to represent the governor's budget. However, on the printed revenue plan that you have in front of you, in the column under state aid, in those two categories, they are level funded at FY15. And the reason for that is they are on the second page of the revenue plan, as the financial planning team, decided to directly offset those increases to the school department. But here, I'm representing the full amount. The reason why it's not on that is it would go into the breakdown between the town and schools' share of revenues. So you can see that there's minimal increases in local receipts, minimal increases in other financial sources. Then you get down to the budget, and you have fixed cost totals. The driving factor of the increase in fixed costs is contributed by the health insurance increase, which at this point in time is a 4.9% increase, plus some additional employees have been added to that figure. You see the general government budget, which is as submitted, with two changes that we will go over in the next slide that the board has been aware of. They were made aware of on the Saturday budget hearing, as well as during one of the Monday night budget hearings. And the school's budget, that is as the preliminary school budget's total budget. This is just a snapshot of our current cash reserves, what's available, and the asterisks denote that those funds are being used in the revenue plan as an other financing source against the budgets. As I just spoke to, the two items that were omitted in the budget that was submitted on 2/13, these items now have been incorporated in the town's budget, and they are part of the $14,022,000 that was shown here. And they represent $15,597 for DPW stormwater expenses. That was just an oversight that was not transposed from the department's request into the final budget copy. And then the $6,781 for CPC expenses, the breakdown is listed and was discussed during CPC's budget presentation. Some unfunded budget items that I'll allow the town administrator to speak to were, the top two were part of his budget memo that was printed in the budget, and the last one was one that just came about with the school having to make cuts in their budget. So I'll let the town administrator speak to these.
Certainly, thank you, Liz. So again, the first one is to add the capacity to the .60 full-time employee position, which would be a GIS coordinator in the IT department, to also take on the public safety IT role at a cost of $23,000. Again, as I identified it, we only partially funded the merit salary and wage increase in the salary pool at $15,000. This would fully fund it at what I believe it has been historically funded at, as I look to Liz to confirm. And the third item, certainly I'm not going to say necessary, but could be important. The .8 full-time employee for town building facility superintendent was intended to be an item that could be shared with the schools, but that if it was unable to be partially funded by the school department, then it would still be able to stand on its own as a .8 full-time employee. I still think that that is the case. However, we may strike a better success at getting a better caliber candidate by having it funded as a full-time employee position. So in the discussions, the finance director and I have added that as a balance that may want to be considered. These are items for consideration directly related to the proposals that I provided the board and the Finance Committee on February 13th. I have fully expected and anticipated that there would be other items that the board members may identify through the course of discussion that they want to see added as well, and I believe Liz will speak to the ability to address that in the next slides.
Any questions up to now?
So I'm just gonna put up the, revenue plan.
You just handed some over, right?
How big can you make the numbers?
I'm trying to make it as big as I can.
Liz, so we all have the papers.
Okay.
If you put the cursor on the line item, I think then we could look at the papers we have.
Okay.
Oh, that's not too bad.
I was trying to get this to close.
Yeah, top.
No.
No, no.
Sorry.
It's right here.
That IT person sooner rather than
Is that okay?
Perfect.
Perfect.
So, you know, we went through the top part of the taxes. It's pretty straightforward. New growth, in the past, we have been, estimating 325,000. So in order, you know, for us to estimate 405, we went back, we looked at all building permits, taken and received prior to December 31st, and we feel comfortable with that figure. There's other items that will increase that figure as time goes on and we certify the tax rate in November. So that, you know, we feel very comfortable with that figure. So that's really the only change in that category. Like I said, under state aid, the Chapter 70 right here, you see that it's level funded. Same with unrestricted general government aid is level funded. And those offsets will be seen further on in this revenue plan. Veterans benefits increases based upon 75% of our expenses that we've submitted, and it's a year prior. So, you know, that makes sense that it would have increased. A small decrease in exemptions for blind, elderly, surviving spouse, and a small decrease in public libraries offset receipts. And school lunch offset receipts has been eliminated completely from the governor's budget. Offset receipts technically aren't revenue, so we're not sure what the House and Senate will do with the offset receipt, but in the grand scheme of things, $7,800 is minor.
I just want to, something that just dawned on me here, and I'm wondering, as it relates to the Berry property and the $35,000 on state-owned land that we get receipts from, if and when the legislature, which should happen before the fiscal year, grants us to take over that property for the sale of marketing, will that go away?
I would expect that at the time we sign purchase and sale, and then, I should say, at the time we exchange the deed for the property, that yes, it would.
All right, so we should
We've not
flag that.
We've not discussed those details with the Commonwealth, but that is my expectation.
All right. So just make a note of that we may want to go back and take a look at that.
So, moving on to local receipts, this column here was our preliminary FY16 budget figures prior to March 27th. And this column here is what we have come to agreement with the financial planning team as of March 27th. So you'll see that the only increase and the only change in local receipts was with motor vehicle excise, and that we increased that $100,000. We feel comfortable with this. It's still conservative. based upon our commitments for motor vehicle excise, we have already committed, more than we committed last year at this point.
Bless you. Thank you.
Moving down to other financing sources, you'll see that the only increase in this column would be an increase from the debt capital stabilization fund, and we increased that by $250,000. The reason why we were very conservative in this column is that we are not relying on the debt service stabilization fund to offset the debt service budget, as we have a capital plan in place and we do not want to take funds away from the capital plan. This money is over and above the required funds that are set in the capital plan and the debt service stabilization fund, so this has no effect on that.
And what was the source of the $250,000?
It will be free cash at town meeting. We'll cover that when we get to the warrant
Okay,
articles
fine.
a little later
Yeah.
on. Okay, so that's it for revenues. Now we're gonna move to the expense portion of the revenue plan. So the changes that took place in the expense portion of the revenue plan would simply be, we needed to adjust state and county charges here to reflect the governor's budget. Most likely the House and Senate will approve his state and county charges. The increase, I believe, is due to the MBTA assessment and the MAPC assessment. Yes. So then moving down to employee benefits detail, like I mentioned earlier, the driving force in our fixed costs is represented in health insurance, and we originally were estimating a 6% increase based upon FY15's budgeted amount. The increase here represents a 4.9% increase on last year's figure, plus $100,000 for new FTEs on both the town and the school side. And the other adjustment that was made was under Medicare, increased to represent 2% of salaries. And if there are new employees, we will have to, if the budget is approved as submitted for both town and school, we may have to adjust this figure, but at this time, this should cover the Medicare costs.
So the 100K is based on a 10K per person employee cost and 10 new employees, 3 currently in the town budget, and 7.1, I believe, in the current school budget.
Okay, so moving down, to show the split of how revenues are split between the town and school, the town receives 34% of revenues after fixed costs are taken off the top, and the school receives 66% of revenues, again, after fixed costs come off of the top. So we had 61 million of total revenue, which is all sources, it's property taxes, it's state aid, local receipts, and other financing sources. Our fixed costs total 19,726,000, and that leaves us with 41 million. So the town receives 14,039,755, and the school receives 27,253,642. We come down here, and we have a few offsets that are directly offsetting the school and the town budget. So we carry down the school available funds. We add the Chapter 70 increase that was shown on the PowerPoint slide. And we also add the unrestricted general government aid increase. It's actually 56,000 and change. We just, to be safe, gave them the straight 50,000, in case something changes between the governor's budget, the House and the Senate. And then we decided to try and see what other resources were available, and we decided that we could borrow $125,000 from the debt capital stabilization that would be repaid when the town receives a FEMA reimbursement for the blizzard this year. That figure represents the amount that we're due to receive for FEMA reimbursement. So we feel that if that comes in before October town meeting, we will put that FEMA reimbursement into the debt capital stabilization. If it does not come in before October town meeting, we will put that in at June. So we'll make sure that that gets repaid in accordance with the capital plan. So the capital improvement planning committee is satisfied. Yes.
Does the FEMA normally come in before October, or is it hit or miss then?
It's hard to say. The blizzard in February of 2013.
Yeah.
I believe we received it in November of the following. So worst case scenario, we'll deal with it at June town meeting.
And by the way, there's a risk, okay, there was a deliberate risk that the capital planning committee, discussed, and that is, we may not get the FEMA money, in which case then we will be using free cash that gets certified sometime after we close this fiscal year to put that money back in. So we're committed to put the money back in. There is an element of risk there.
So moving on to the town available funds, this figure is carried from above, and then the town has one direct offset, which is a direct offset from the sanitation stabilization fund, and that will offset the sanitation budget. As you'll see in the warrant articles when we review them, there's a warrant article to transfer surplus funds into the sanitation stabilization fund, and then those funds have a particular purpose to offset the sanitation budget. So that increases the town's available revenues to $14,099,755. And as you saw from the slideshow, with the budget adjustments that had been omitted but are funded and part of the town's total budget, the town's total budget was $14,022,000 and change. But there are items that the town administrator is looking to have.
So we have what, about 70,000?
77,000.
77,000. To deal with items currently that are on our radar screen, we haven't made a decision. We heard from the recreation department, I think, during the budget proposal, that they were looking for more money that's not in the budget. And there are some other items that we as board members might think are important that we want to add to the budget. So, any questions or comments regarding the current budget plan?
No, I wasn't able to make the school committee budget hearing.
I can give you a little bit of background on what went on. At the financial planning team meeting, which we spent a good portion of Friday morning on, the initial adjustments that Liz went through got them down to what we thought was about a $400,000 budget gap. And we applied the 175 after some discussion. And that would have brought their gap down to 200 plus, give or take a few dollars. At the budget hearing, at the budget workshop they had, much to my surprise, the number was back to, in spite of this, it was back to $407,000, somewhere in that range. So what they had done was, they had presented a block of things they were going to remove from the budget that would have got, at the financial planning team meeting, that would have got us to the $200,000 gap on their side. And because John Bernard told us, he said, because they hadn't vetted it with the entire school committee, for the budget hearing, they put it back. And they had a long discussion about that, and he also produced a list of other items not ranked to the tune of about $365,000. which would be items selectively that they could pick to balance the budget. At the budget hearing last night, I think they basically presented getting the gap down to the $200,000 range by saying these are the items we're gonna remove. They still had it at 400,000, but they had presented those items. They did present the balance of the items. They took questions and input from, and it was this year I thought there was a larger crowd of non-town personnel, and between there were a few teachers, and there was the school committee, and members of the board of selectmen, the usual people that go finance committee. But there was a good crowd in the corner of what I would call parents, at least they seem to be parents of school children. There weren't as many questions as I expected. And in the end, they made no decisions. They were going to go back off and continue to work on bringing the budget back to a balance, which they will have to have as we get ready for town meeting. So that's where they stand. They're looking for more money, and or they're going to have to make some changes. Now, part of the I don't remember the name of the initiative. Do you remember, Michael, what they
The
call it?
NRPS 2016.
Yeah. So evidently, this is something that the previous superintendent had got going, and over the past few years, they've been stepping it along. So several of those items in there are on the list, and there's a struggle between, do we remove these or do we find money elsewhere, and manage to keep those initiatives in place. So when we left the financial planning team meeting, we were at the 7.1 FTEs, but that was when they had the number down to roughly $207 million. If they find additional money or find other ways of putting some of the new initiative in, there will actually be additional employees in the budget. They can do it by us finding additional money. They can do it by, in their budget of $27,253,000,
That's just the available funds.
what's available, right. So, in the $27+ million budget, right, there's an additional $2.2 or $2.3 million that are not part of the budget, but they are funds that they collect for athletics, bus fees. I think they charge for all-day kindergarten. All those monies get put into their total operating budget. Some of those budgets have reserves that they keep. So it's possible that they use some additional money that they have against the budget. I'm just guessing at that.
But in relation to those funds, is that treated like a revolving account?
Yeah.
So it's just,
So, they try to keep, I'm sure they try to keep some level. They claim they're using more of it. Actually, they're using a little less in a couple of places, as I recall.
Their total overall budget was 30 million plus with then those offsets bring it down to the 27E.
Does everybody get that? Because if they don't, spend a little time explaining it.
Which part, what you just said?
their actual
No.
overall budget is
No, the fact that
30
they
plus
have
million.
this,
Yeah.
not
Two-
in
two plus million.
their budget book, they have it. They call
Right.
them offsets, okay?
Right. when it is, okay, yes.
It's totally transparent, except that the amount of those funds is not clear in the budget.
Right. Any other questions?
No, so basically, the way things rest right now, $77,000 is available to think about on the general government side, as far as any other initiatives we may want to embrace. So.
And if we needed to
Augment.
spend more money, then we'd have to dig deeper.
Mr. Chairman, when you say spend more money, we have to dig a little deeper, is that referencing any additional money that the school's asking from us?
No, not necessarily. We have an
So the school's
obligation,
asked-
similar to them, we have an obligation to fund, and they.
Right, and then we're 77,000 in the.
We've already basically given them $150,000.
$225.
Right,
225?
225, right, if you look at it.
right, okay. Got it.
Okay.
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 Michael, you have any comments?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I apologize. The only thing that I would add is, and this was not something that was identified early on in the budget when the town administrator's recommendation was forwarded to the Selectmen and the Finance Committee. But I do think that we have a need for additional capacity in the area of human resources in the town hall. I know that it's something that that the superintendent and I have discussed as well. That we could probably all benefit from. I don't have a formal proposal to identify at the meeting tonight, but that's an area that I believe that we do have a need for additional staff capacity here in the town hall. And I note that area because it was not on the listing that I provided on February 13th.
And of course, the one thing that I flagged this evening, the $35,000 money we received from the state for state
Oh,
land.
yes, right, we have to take that.
We overlooked that altogether, so we gotta go back and, so if we have 77, we gotta take the 35 out of that.
He'll be around, right?
She's in kind of that, just, yeah.
Okay.
You'll see it come up on the warrant articles.
Yep, I saw that. Let's talk about the payment in lieu from Hillview. That isn't coming.
What?
That is not coming. Let's leave the comment for that, though.
Yes, you'll note, sorry, I closed the revenue plan, but on the front page of the revenue plan,
Where
That's it.
there's other financing resources? Should be
no,
in
it's
there.
actually under local receipts in lieu of tax payment, it's listed at $254,000, and that it's level funded from FY15. And that represents, what we did was, they're gonna pay us, the whole amount in FY15, and we are only taking account of 1/5 of that, because they're taking a time off for 5 years. So this year we'll receive, essentially 39,000, next year 39,000, and, keep going for the 3 years after that. So that is taken into account, and we need to address that through a warrant article of how we fund that item, because we'll receive the whole amount in revenue this year. And what we'll need to do is that revenue then will turn into free cash, and we'll have to appropriate free cash to cover the following years. We can talk about that.
Which means we'll have
when-
to put it into the debt stabilization fund or something, so that it's available to apply to the next couple of years' budgets. Mr. Yule?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand. The payment, we're talking about the Hillview and the normal payment in lieu of taxes, which is usually $50,000 a year, correct?
No, it's $135,000.
It's a big different number. And we're only going to be taking 39,000?
So, this year, they're actually gonna pay us, a back payment that they did not pay us.
Right.
So they have budgeted to pay us $195,000, prior to the fiscal year closing. that 195 is then divided by 5, and that's how
Okay.
we come up with.
And back when I was on the board, I thought it was a $50,000.
No, it was always 100 to 110, and then it gets hitched up.
It was about a 125.
And then it was 125, 130. It was 100
I
to
don't remember
110 for a
getting
long
50,000.
time.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions?
Just want to comment that I appreciate the finance planning team's efforts to balance things out as best we can at this point, and, all things considered.
Well, the interesting thing is that there are the number of things. There was the Hillview,
Right?
winter, and it was the other item, it's just on the tip of my tongue. Oh, OPEB.
Yeah.
So those are new costs, or expenses, and, the snow and ice ate up more than the amount of free cash that we had kind of figured we need for winter. So, overall, we managed to do better than I thought. I thought it was even gonna be worse.
Yeah, you were doom and gloom.
What?
You were doom and gloom,
Yeah.
for a little while. It seemed to be,
And there's some,
Yeah.
they've said there's some risk in the
Right.
governor's budget. Although, when we had Brad Jones, he attended the financial planning team meeting at our request, and he did say that if there's any risk, it's in the unrestricted state aid, not Chapter 70. But FinCom, have any comments, questions?
We don't have any money.
You don't have any money?
No, down.
Oh.
We don't have a lot of flexibility to increase items in the FY16 budget.
Understand. We're responsible, we're gonna have a balanced budget. But it's fair to take these items and understand what they are and rank them accordingly and see what we can do or can't do. So, do we wanna spend a few minutes talking about those items? Just,
I defer to the will of the board.
okay, so, you have a few.
Yes.
lock the doors.
No. Leave them unlocked. Thank you. So the items that were identified, perhaps, they're not up there now, but $50,000 identified for merit salary or wage increases.
So that would be $35,000, right? Because there's 15 in the budget now?
50. It's a total of 65 generally year to
Oh,
year. We
okay.
have 15 in right now, the balance would be
All right,
50.
So that's 50.
$12,000 for bringing the facilities position to a full-time employee. It's currently funded at $48,000.
And how much more do you want for that?
12,000. And I'm going to look to the finance director to jog my memory, but the number for the difference for the IT position,
23,000. The
20.
total was 85,000. Those three items that were listed.
okay.
So
it's
23.
23,000 to take a .6 employee to make it a full-time employee.
Okay.
Or 1.0. And then, as I identified here, not something that was identified earlier in the budget submission, but additional capacity for human resources staffing here in the town hall as well.
And how much are we estimating?
I don't have a number at this point in time, but I would venture to guess that it would be somewhere in the vicinity of at least 60,000.
Okay.
And any other initiatives that may have been proposed by department heads, such as recreation, not on the list yet?
No, actually, Michael Prisco because he couldn't be here tonight, had sent an email with a bunch of things on it, and I think that was one of them, so I was just gonna pull it up. Because
Mr.
I think he
Chairman,
had a number identified on it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
just to correct the record, with regard to the request for a human resources position, I think it would be more in the vicinity of 80,000. I know, I was thinking it as I was saying it.
Okay.
That's salary and benefits?
That's a salary alone. I'd be prepared to make a formal proposal with regard to the recommendation at the meeting of April 27th.
I'm just looking at, I thought he had a number in here, maybe not. No, he didn't put a number in. Do you recall what the Parks and Recs were looking for?
I believe the finance director may know the number.
Approximately 60,000.
It was 60.
59,800.
And then were there other initiatives, police department was looking for? The
The
taser?
The police chief's recommendation was his request was what was recommended, so there wasn't anything that he was requesting that was not funded.
The tasers are not in the capital, right?
No.
They're in the police budget.
That's correct. Liz, if you could just check my memory, but there was nothing we reduced from his request, right?
And I guess we have to put that 35K on the list too, right?
The,
Loss in state aid, loss in, on state land.
we have a situation where we have incentives for when we acquire the property.
Mm-hmm.
I should say for when we sell the property. I don't know, right now, we have a situation where we're factoring taking ownership of the land by the end of the calendar year, based on the legislative schedule and based on the work that would need to take place. So I don't know if we want to allow for half of it to be reduced rather than the whole thing.
Well, let's see, that comes out on, what is that? What do we
When
get
do they
that money,
usually do
Liz?
When do
Is
they
that a
usually
cherry
do?
sheet item?
Yes, it is, I'd have to see if that one comes monthly or if that's quarterly. State aid has gone to monthly reimbursement,
Mm-hmm.
so I could confirm that.
Okay.
That could be an annual thing as well, I'm not 100%
Yeah.
Annual at the end of the year, that's not good. At the beginning of the year, it'd be good, but we might have to give it back, or some of it back. All right, so,
That could be a term, a set of terms we could work out with the Commonwealth as well, where we've got a budget in place that's factoring on a revenue stream.
I'm just gonna make a note of it here, so. Anybody think of anything else that, as part of the budget review that might have, popped up as something that, we wanna talk about?
I can't think of anything right now.
Can we send you an email?
So the total of the numbers, including that 35K, is 260K. I did it right.
Just
No.
in relation to the
No?
excise tax,
What did I do?
excise tax revenue, we increased
Oh,
that.
you're right, no,
right?
that's
It's
right.
165
By 100,000.
before the 35.
And generally,
It's
we've always
50,
run about
12,
1.5. That was
23,
always kind of a
80,
cushion.
60, and 35.
Yeah. What's the 60 for?
Parks and Rec,
Okay, I don't have that.
none of which we made a decision on. I just wanted to list
Right.
what was hanging out there.
I got 225 with the 60 for Parks and Rec.
But you have the 35 in there as well?
No, not the 35.
He does, I think. Yes, that's the difference, 35.
He said 160.
I said 260.
Oh, I'm sorry, I apologize. I thought you said 160. I apologize.
again, I was just commenting in relation to the excise tax, we've increased that by $100,000, our anticipated use of it. Historically, we've underestimated.
Yeah, I think that, you know, we looked at last year's actuals and then the commitment that went out this year,
Mhm.
and I thought we felt comfortable with it. We didn't use the overlay money though, did we?
That will be discussed with the warrant articles.
What?
It'll be discussed in the context of the warrant articles.
Okay.
And what do we anticipate as far as legal costs in the upcoming fiscal year? I know we're all set for the current fiscal year covering.
We looked at the projected use of town council as of January when the budget was put together and projected that into fiscal year 2016.
I'm thinking more in terms of special counsel.
Any special council actions we believe would be handled in a manner similar to how it was handled last year, which was through either special town meeting transfer or 3% transfers at the end of the year. And we do have an identified funding source for that.
Liz?
I just checked and we received the state-owned land, state aid payments monthly of approximately, almost $3,000 a month.
Thank you.
Nice, I like it monthly. That's good.
So we'll put that at the very bottom. Okay, do we want to go on to the articles then?
Mr. Chairman, if I could make a suggestion, perhaps we could go from the summary spreadsheet, which you had requested that we put in, and take the articles that have financial implications at this evening's meeting, because most of the articles that are non-financial still have work to be done on them. It might
Yep.
focus the discussion. And to the finance director, I'll start by going through the listing, and certainly weigh in if I'm misstating anything, I'll look to you for clarification on anything as well. So again, the first Article 1, the fiscal year 2015 budget amendment, that'll continue to be an evolving area. I'm not aware that we know of anything in particular right now that would require action in that article, at least not as of last Thursday. But of course, that's
Do we
fluid.
want to, I can think of putting money from water revenue into the capital fund to finish, or bring that.
That's a separate article, right? Yeah, it comes up in Article 4, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, so that's in there, okay.
What we would do in this article would be if there's any surplus funds, we could use this as an avenue to transfer them out to some source, like we've done in the past.
Okay. All right.
The next item next article would address the fiscal year 2015 snow and ice deficit. And again, the number that you see on there would reflect the appropriation of $175,000 in the fiscal year 2015 budget, with $250,000 being raised on a tax recap for fiscal year 2016.
Sorry, what was that number?
$250,000. The balance of the expenditures are identified here. And Liz, if you could just take us through the funding sources on those.
Sure. So from last Thursday to today, the balance has changed slightly, and as we get closer to town meeting, our balance in snow and ice will change slightly, and that's due to mailbox replacements for damaged mailboxes, as well as meal tickets that the DPW employees receive for particular storms. They have until June to use those meal tickets, so they don't have to use them at, when the incident is occurring. So it will change slightly, but the balance listed here of our deficit is $881,252. As the town administrator mentioned, we will raise $250,000 of that on the tax recap. That leaves us with $631,252 to fund. And it is our intent to fund $250,000 of the $631,000 with overlay surplus that will be released from different years of overlay, and we will appropriate that to the snow and ice deficit. Then that leaves us with 381,000, approximately 381,000 to fund from free cash. So there's two different revenue sources to fund the snow and ice deficit.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
If there's no questions, the next article, transfer in of funds to the Capital Improvement Stabilization Fund in the amount of $500,000. I think that was presented in the context of the budget proposal. So unless there's any questions, we'll move on to the next article. Liz, if I could ask you to take the next item?
Excuse me, just on the budget stabilization fund, 500,000 in there, what would that leave for a balance, approximately?
777,000 approximately.
And then,
Keep in mind, Steve, that the capital plan now is making use of that.
that's what my next question was, how much were you anticipating utilizing it in the upcoming year to,
Sure, so, we plan on putting 500,000 of free cash into the capital or debt capital stabilization fund. Then, as noted in the presentation earlier, we also are going to transfer out 125,000. So, current balance in the stabilization fund is 777,000 approximately. Then we're going to put 500,000 in. Then we're going to turn around and transfer out 625,000. So the balance then will go down to 650. Does that answer your question?
yes,
Okay.
thank you.
And how much of free cash is going into capital?
500,000.
500,000.
An additional fund.
You mean the Capital Improvement Stabilization Fund or the capital purchases?
Capital purchase is direct.
Oh, that's.
Yeah, I
was-
think,
Good.
it's,
Okay.
sorry.
Okay, so we're going to transfer 500,000 of free cash into the debt capital stabilization fund, but then to fund capital items as part of the capital improvement
Mhm.
plan, we are using 150,000 of free cash. So that's separate.
On top of the
Right.
500,000 that's going in
Right.
here.
Right.
That was I just wanted to bring that number up. Okay.
The next one, Bob, this answers your question that was in regards to Article number 1.
Right.
This is transfer funds to the water stabilization fund.
Mhm.
So the certified retained earnings as of July 1st, 2014 for the water enterprise fund was 108,547. And by the water enterprise fund transferring their entire retained earnings into the water infrastructure stabilization fund, they will have paid back the sum that was borrowed in years past, and they will have put an excess of approximately 13,000 into that fund. And from what I understand, and I was not here at that time, but it was the intent to start building up the water infrastructure stabilization fund. I don't know what the total intent was, but from doing some research, that's what I have found out, that I will rely
Well,
on this board.
we anticipate that with our quest to connect up to MWRA, we are going to need capital, and we're going to be bonding capital too. So whatever we can build that fund up to is just going to help us and provide, a little bit of a cushion, even if it's just to keep the water rates from taking step functions, right? So, I think that we've got to spend some time on that. We also have to look at the water rate. And maybe the sooner the better. And can I assume that associated with what we're paying Andover for water and what they were billing us for, that we've been holding that money? Do we have that money?
The differences only exist in fiscal year 2014. The discussions have centered upon an agreement that would start July 1st of 2014, so there would not be any
So,
implication.
in this fiscal year, nothing, but, so we have what, 2 months?
2 months.
2 months, okay. That's when they, in May 1st, when they raised the water rate to $3.40 or something. And we paid them what we thought was a fair rate, what we were paying
Correct.
before.
Yep.
By the way, we are meeting with them tomorrow morning again,
All right.
7:30. Joe and I and Michael.
Will you be meeting with the board members, or are you meeting with the?
No, the negotiating team.
Which has expanded beyond the town manager and town administrator, obviously.
Yeah, we're back to, I called Alex and I said, you know, this thing is just going, and they were busy with their own set of problems, and I suggested that the two boards get together, and he said, well, I'd like to have one more meeting. So, we're having one more meeting.
Okay.
Next.
Next article is appropriate money to the stabilization fund. At this point in time, the recommendation is to pass over that article. We had discussion in the fall about potentially devising a plan to make a contribution into the stabilization fund. However, given the pressures on the budget this particular year, specifically regarding snow and ice, as well as our intention to commit to making a deposit into the stabilization fund for our OPEB, there is no recommendation for a deposit at this point in time. There are no known overlay deficits for fiscal year 2015 as identified in Article 6. Prior year bills is something that will continue to be determined leading up to the town meeting. The operating budget, the board is well aware of at this point, and the capital expenditures will be presented to the Board of Selectmen at the meeting of April 27th, the next meeting.
Okay, we're on schedule for that, Don?
Article 15, the funding of retirement obligations, again, that's factored into our overall expenditures for the next fiscal year. It's $100,000, and it largely consists of projected retirements in the school department. Article 16, dependent upon the performance of the solid waste program over the course of the fiscal year, and a determination will be made as to funds to be transferred into the stabilization fund ahead of the town meeting and closer to the town meeting. So we don't have a projected number at this point in time. Article 17 is the OPEB contribution. Again, we had identified a number of $250,000 as the goal for projected new hires in the course of a fiscal year. During the course of the budget deliberations with the financial planning team, we identified a recommendation of $125,000 and have been carrying that number since roughly December, maybe early January.
And
Just in relation to that, I know we had some discussion about, stemming the tide or stopping the bleeding. It didn't appear to be really, put the figure at $250,000 annually for new hires?
Well,
Just for new hires, yeah.
from my perspective, I didn't have a problem with doing half of it this year and stepping it up, similar to what we did with the capital, just so that, you know, you don't get shock, and there's a lot of other items in the budget that, other little surprises in the budget or changes this year that, you know, we're absorbing, so.
Just in
But we
relation to
could-
these funds, how are they treated, Liz, as far as segregated out and held for this purpose? I mean, can they be invested differently?
Sure, so, I believe it was 2 town meetings ago, we created the OPEB trust fund. Prior to that, we had an OPEB stabilization fund, which we were limited with our investments. But by creating the OPEB trust fund, we have a larger pool of investments that we can invest in. So We follow the state and how they're investing their other post-employment benefits, and it's, you know, in a separate trust fund, so it actually, you know, does do well. So we could, we're moderately aggressive, so we could probably be aggressive.
So was the financial planning team on board with the suggested step-up method or non-committal, you know, other than?
Admittedly, we haven't
120
spent, we have
125 is
not
better than
spent too
50.
much time on it.
Okay.
Overall, there wasn't, you know, any kickback saying, well, there's an area where we ought to cut for this year. That didn't happen. By the way, I spoke to Senator Tarr at, trying to remember when it was, but when he was in town or something, and.
At
oh,
the
it may have-
CIT presentation
Yeah,
for Jeff and.
yeah, I think it was at the
Ginny?
senior
Yeah,
breakfast.
senior breakfast, yeah.
And I mentioned to him the approach we were trying to take with OPEB. He thought that was an interesting idea. Evidently, he hadn't heard anyone propose that in the past. So, and that is to start to fund new employees. So at some point in time in the future, that's off our back. And presumably, we continue to pay the health insurance for our retirees out of the budget, as we've been doing forever.
Right.
So, I mean, the only impact with that is that, you know, every year the insurance cost goes up, so.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, eventually it blows up, and that's why there's a big concern about finding a way of dealing with it. People are living longer, and therefore the exposure grows every year.
The Hillview in lieu of tax payment, again, I believe the finance director explained that earlier, but if there's any questions, I'm sure we could answer them. Liz, if I could ask you to discuss the reappropriation of the next two articles. Thank you.
Just a question, not related to the tax payment, but have you heard any word on estimated opening of the course, Steve?
Or this week, possibly.
Friday.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
If you look at my backyard, I wouldn't say that.
There's still some-
Yeah, looks
I
pretty
guess
good.
it is
Still some
kind of
snow.
open.
Yeah.
This would be
Wow.
machine. Maybe machine.
Okay. Article 19, reappropriate borrowing proceeds for a DPW dump truck. This was an article that took place at October 2011 town meeting. It was for the purchase of a DPW dump truck. And when DPW went out to bid for this item, the bid came in lower than what was anticipated to be used, and so there's a remaining balance of bond proceeds of $29,484. This needs to be reappropriated to a like purpose, and when I say like purpose, it has to be as long as the original borrowing, you know, so some other vehicle, we happen to borrow this dump truck for a 5-year term, so it needs to be, an item
Could
that
it
has-
not be appropriated as part of the capital plan?
Yes, it needs to be a separate article.
So we'd have to move that article in front of,
We will specify what item on the capital plan
Right.
qualifies for this.
but I'm saying the article has to come before the capital article.
The authorization to reappropriate.
Sure,
Yeah.
I don't know the legality of that, but that's fine.
I would think so.
I would guess you'd have to reappropriate, authorize the reappropriation before you can spend it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yes.
So, and the reason for this is, when you borrowed, we borrowed in June of 2012 for this item. So we've now had the bond proceeds sitting on the books for almost 3 years. And you are supposed to spend bond proceeds within 24 months of borrowing. So as long as it's a project that we're going to purchase or do right away, there's no issue with it. So, you know, I feel that another vehicle that's listed on the capital plan will probably fall into that category.
Then we should do it.
And then, in regards to Article 20, Hillview, had facility improvements as a capital item at October of 2012. This was prior to the, capital plan moving to June town meeting. So that was when it was originally approved. We banned it for a year, and then last April, we went long-term on it. Hillview was part of a larger borrowing that we borrowed last April for the high school, middle school project. And they actually were allowed to borrow tax exempt versus typically all of Hillview's borrowings are taxable borrowings. So because it was part of an $18 million borrowing, they needed to borrow $400,000 in total, $300 for the facility improvements and $100 for fairway improvements, and that was de minimis compared to the $18 million that we were borrowing, so they were allowed to borrow tax exempt. So this was an opportunity that we could reappropriate their bond proceeds if they were not going to use it. They have to use it by April of 2016. I had a conversation this afternoon with Peter Hemme, the treasurer, and he assures me that they will use this bond proceeds by April of 2016.
So does that mean we're gonna pass over this article?
Yes.
Okay.
I gave them the opportunity, where it was tax exempt, they would have the opportunity to, give it over to the town, and then we would take on the debt payments,
And use the money for
and use the money for our capital plan,
Mhm.
because it doesn't make sense to have money sitting on the books that we borrowed, that we're paying debt service on, that we're paying interest on without using it.
Steve, you have any comment regarding that?
No, other than, they're looking to,
You're comfortable they'll achieve the goal of
yeah,
spending?
they have some plans.
Okay. So we could remove that article, there's no sense even having it on there, right?
Yeah,
That's
I think we put it on there as a safety valve,
No.
a few months ago when we didn't know what was gonna
You're the
happen.
liaison, what's the
Yeah.
recommendation, leave it there?
Let me have one more discussion with Peter and then,
Okay. Okay. Article 21?
Okay.
I'm gonna start and then you jump in at the appropriate point in time. So there's a balance of the Martins Pond flood mitigation bond proceeds. I believe the number's $164,000 approximately.
Right.
And that balance it's a reappropriation of a previous appropriation, which was for the
Right.
replacement of the culvert,
Right.
which
62, right?
on Route 62 in Wilmington,
Yeah.
which wasn't able to be done. So the balance is $164,000. The Public Works Department has identified some $35,000 in projects that they would seek to do to address the issue of flood mitigation. And it's mostly monitoring at the areas where there's been problems with backup and water flow, as well as the removal of debris in those areas as well.
And this is at Martin's Pond or at various culverts feeding?
Yeah, it's up, what must be upstream of the pond, is my understanding of it. I don't know the exact location. But they have a plan that's relative directly to flood mitigation. At the same time, there's also been a proposal put forth with regard to the removal of milfoil in the pond, or I guess the treatment of milfoil. I shouldn't say removal, but treatment of milfoil. And I know that, Liz, we were trying to speak with bond counsel to get an understanding as to our limitations there. Is there any additional information from them?
I had a conference call early this morning with our financial advisor for Southwest, and this project was also, so you have to go back to the original issuance of the spending terms. So Route 62 culvert was borrowed in June of 2012. So we need to spend everything by this June. And what I conveyed back is if the milfoil mitigation was going to take place, you know, shortly after June, that would be okay. And it does qualify under the terms of the borrowing and all that. However, to spread it out longer than shortly after June, it does not qualify. So I was given that they want to do it over a 5-year period, if that's correct.
I believe that that's what their proposal was.
The bulk of it would be in the first 2 years, and then there'd be monitoring.
It still wouldn't qualify if we don't spend all of the proceeds, you know, before September. That was the deadline that they gave me.
Wondering if we can contract, can we encumber the funds?
No, and it needs to be spent.
Can we spend the money on roads?
Yes. It has the same term.
So if we did that, Steve, what we'd end up doing is having that money in the debt stabilization fund, because then the capital plan wouldn't need all of it. Because whatever money is, how much beyond the Chapter 90 money, Dawn? How much?
100.
100,000, so that takes care of a piece of it.
Yeah. And then what we would do is commit to the program.
Commit to their program. How much do they need per year, do you know?
I don't have that information.
Yeah. We have it electronically.
We don't have to have all the answers tonight either.
No,
We have
but
some time now.
I think it's important that we,
Yeah. Because once it's in debt capitalization, we apply it to our debt, which moves money back down into operating expenses, and we'll, rather than split it, obviously, in this case, we would apply it to
so,
I saw it.
either out of general operating or out of free cash that might have been applied to the budget.
the PA is one I go there. Oops. 5 years or so, we don't have them.
Yeah, that's.
92,000?
Yeah. Thank you.
92,048?
So they have identified a 5-year spending plan. They would need 21,700 in the first year, 20,725 in the second year, 18,100 in the third year, $15,475 in the fourth and the fifth
Mhm.
years. So that's the breakdown of the spending that they're looking for. So I think that what you're alluding to is we use the existing appropriation, reappropriate it for roads.
Yeah, so, you know,
And then appropriate out of the, somehow or another.
It'd be borrowing, I think.
there's 100K of free cash going into roads. 100,000 somewhere, right, going into roads, above and beyond the Chapter 90.
But that's borrowed money, right, Don?
That's borrowed money.
Borrowed money, okay. Well, I guess we could take a look at the overall capital plan. What else could we use that money for? Could we use it to buy a truck?
Town Road was the one that made the most sense.
Yes.
As it was 100,000, and the borrowing terms that we borrowed for was 15+ years. So Town Road can be borrowed for up to 20 years. So that fit into the category best. It
I
has to be
see.
something that has borrowing term of greater than 15
Mhm.
years.
So it means we don't bond some things, or we bond some other things that we weren't gonna bond on. I mean, you can
How
take a
would-
look at the whole
Okay.
capital plan.
My concern is that we make a commitment to the program for the Martins Pond.
Right.
So if we're talking about borrowed funds over there, but not necessarily.
Well, I think we ought to, let Michael and Liz take a look at what the options are and come back. I think you understand the intent, right? Is what we'd like to do is to find a way of allocating whatever Martin's Pond needs out of that money by freeing money up to apply to the budget on an annual basis for the next 5 years to the tune of around 20 grand per year. And put that money somewhere else so that we have the 20 grand per year.
What would be the amount that they're looking for FY16?
It was a little more than 20, right?
21,000, I believe.
Would it be the intent to fund the whole project up front or fund it annually?
Personally, I'd like to fund it up front and give them the flexibility to do the program and adjust the program over the next 3 to 5 years, depending upon how it reacts, so that we don't have to go back every year for appropriations to mitigate the problem. So that's me. I'd like to commit to the program, have the funds available, and then, if it's 26,000 this year and 22,000 the following year.
Yeah, the problem is, though, we can't put it into debt stabilization. We can't transfer it into that. We have to apply it to capital expenditures that fit the timeline, right? Yes, Don?
Just kind of thinking off the top of my head, and I don't fully understand what this whole appropriation is, but if we were to use the 100,000 of that leftover bond fund for roads this year, we have an appropriation going into the capital stabilization fund every year from appropriate of anywhere from 125,000 up to, I think it goes up to about 150,000. Perhaps you could short that in the out years by the $20,000 or $15,000 or whatever you need to put into this Martins Pond program, and that would be your offset.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Chairman, what I suggest is if the finance director and Mr. Keller are willing, we could sit down and look at the options
Yeah, I
and see if there's a
think that would be
recommendation we
best.
can make.
Yeah, just as long as we meet the needs and
Yeah,
effectuate.
and what Steve is suggesting is that we find a way of making it a hard, fast commitment, not
So
one
there's
that
not
we say we're
something-
gonna do it, and then next year we don't have the
Yeah,
money.
it falls by the wayside because some other priority
Mhm.
came up. To me, I think if you're gonna buy into the
No, I mean,
program, you need to buy into the
Martin's
program.
Pond is a town resource,
Yeah.
and it needs to be protected.
Okay, so figure it out.
Okay?
Would that require another article?
So we have a second article on here with regard to this in the event that we're not able to work out a funding source through the existing borrowing. We do not have a funding source identified for this separate article, but we put it on there to reserve it as an option for the board, depending
Right.
upon the outcome of the board's discussions. So that'll continue to be there, and I would suggest that it probably is going to need to be there, at least for the next budget meeting, if not beyond.
End up with something like Dawn suggested, that 164 number would drop down to 21, and it'd be in this article. And then we'd have to put an article in for the next 4 years.
Excuse me.
Mr. Yule?
Yes, which is the second article? Are you talking about 22 and 23?
We're talking
We're talking about 22.
22.
Yeah, I know that's for the, okay, so that's the second article that you're talking about?
Right, so
Okay.
we put
Those
on,
two.
we put on a second article in the event that Article 21 wasn't an appropriate funding source,
Right.
that Article 22 would be there as an avenue for the
Both
board
those
to fund it.
articles may be rewritten depending on what you guys come up
Right.
with. but-
Article 23 is to fund the Route 28 corridor study. Again, it's an initiative of the Community Planning Commission. I think it was discussed in the course of their budget presentation a couple of weeks ago.
No, that wasn't funded yet either, right?
It is funded through free
That-
cash. Yes.
Okay, all right.
That one is
Oh,
calculated.
that's right, you said that.
Liz has carried it as a funded
Right,
item,
okay.
calculation of free cash
Mm.
use. But I believe it was referenced at the last meeting. Article 24, which is an article that would fund the interpretive display of Native American artifacts recovered from the J.T. Berry property. I believe that's approximately $25,000 being requested. I know that the petitioner is looking closely at this request and as to whether or not they want to proceed with this request. So I'd ask that we continue any discussion of it till the next meeting.
Mr. Yule.
Chairman, you said Article 24?
24, yes.
How come I have 38 articles?
We're going from the listing,
This was in our packet, just the
Oh,
just the
okay.
money one.
just the financial articles for this evening. Excuse me.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
That's fine.
Okay. And I believe that concludes the review of the articles, at least for this evening. Just a
Those are
note,
all the money articles, right?
there are certainly a number of other articles that will come up for which there's still work ongoing. The highlights I'd identify are the sidewalk snow removal bylaw and the enforcement of the so-called littering and junk bylaw as well. Those two articles we're still working on, but we'll have a recommendation for the 27th.
This Article 39, which is a citizen's petition
Yes.
to rezone parcels, is there money required for this, or is this just,
My understanding is it would only be the money required for any advertised hearings and staff time at the Community Planning Commission to consider the zoning request. I don't think that any direct appropriation is required for it.
okay. And just a question for you, Steve, on 38, the street acceptance for the high school driveway, will that finish everything that we need on that
Yes.
issue?
We would hope so.
Yeah, we did, Mr. Chairman, on that article, and I apologize to Steve and not having had an opportunity to brief him, but we did, the Public Works Director and the Town Planner and I did meet to go over it and just confirm that everything that we understood to be the case in the fall was in fact the case, and it is in fact the case. We will need to do an additional street layout plan in addition to in a street acceptance plan. There will be a cost associated with that, so we'll need to ask the Secondary School Building Committee to assist us with funding that, because the plans that were drawn for the easements are not sufficient to pass muster for a street acceptance.
What's the dollar amount?
Right now, we have an estimate of $9,200, which includes the installation of meets and bounds and an as-built plan. We've asked if the CPC would consider waiving those requirements for this road, where it is a town-owned road at this point in time, and I await a response back from them. But we're on track to get this all done, to get the appropriate hearings done in a timely fashion, to get this taken up at the town meeting.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't
That's
get
all
to
right.
before.
That's good.
Jeff?
Yes, on the Article 25, what I have here on the snow removal, do you have, you said you were working on that. Is it the wording you're working on?
Yeah, it is. I can speak broadly to the strategy if the board would like to hear. Again, we've not finalized it, but it is a matter of the wording and the identification of the areas. What we try to do is, through the work of the police department, to identify the critical pedestrian paths in town, those areas where we believe that there's a significant amount of foot traffic. And then to identify the town's capability to remove snow and ice from those paths in a timely manner and much in the way that we do it now. And then through bylaw to identify those pedestrian zones to require sidewalk snow removal by the property owner rather than a tenant or otherwise, because it gives us the capability where if they don't do it, we would be able to go through what they call a clean and lean, where and I'm sure Mr. Fode's familiar with this, where the Public Works Department or contractor would basically go and remove the snow from the sidewalk if the snow was not removed within the constraints of the bylaw, and then assess that as a fine on the property tax as a lien on the property, which gives us the ability to recover the cost for removing the snow. So it's intended to maybe focus the scope of the existing bylaw to be a little more reflective of those areas where the police department and the public works department have identified high pedestrian use. So I'm expecting that to be the Main Street corridor. I'm expecting that to be the areas in and around the schools as well. And then to identify a way that we know the snow will get removed if somebody determines that they don't want to comply with the bylaw. And that's broadly the concept that we're working on, and I think, at least from the previous discussions, that that's reflective of where the board wants to see this go, but we certainly we welcome any feedback or comment.
So the
So
intent, I'm sorry.
do we have the ability to flag by property owner whether or not they are required? Because, you know, we got into this issue on Route 28 where, well, there is a sidewalk or there's no sidewalk.
Yeah, we've looked at that pretty
After the
closely.
snowfall fell, it was difficult for the police to,
Mr. Chairman, it was our intention to identify it very specifically in the bylaw, whether it be from, on a particular road from one street to another, or on a particular road from one property number to another.
Okay.
And that's an example that was identified in other communities as having worked fairly well. We just didn't think that, when we started to look at a broad bylaw that would have impacted the town-wide, we just didn't see that it would be a worthwhile modification. So we're trying to be a little more targeted, with the spirit really being not to punish property owners, but to obtain compliance and get the snow removed from the sidewalk. Because, well, fines are a great way to try to address the issue. Ultimately, we want the snow removed from the sidewalk, period.
one more, Jeff?
Yeah, have you had any discussions with the Disabilities Commission at all?
I have not. When we do have a proposal that we're prepared to review with the commission, then we will do so, but we're not quite at that moment yet. I
So
expect.
you have no input from them regarding ADA and requirements and so on?
Well, I think prior to a conversation with the commission, what we would want to have is an understanding of what the routes would be first. Right now, we would be looking to say that we're looking at areas in town, but I'm unable to point to exactly where those areas are. I think when we have an intended map, if you will, of where those routes would be, we would then want to vet it with the Disabilities Commission.
Anything else? TA, have anything else? TA report?
One moment, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of items for tonight's report. The first, as the board are aware, the town was selected to receive a $10,000 Massachusetts Downtown Initiative grant for technical assistance to perform a complete streets study of Main Street. This was an application that we had talked about back in the fall. The study will evaluate options for creating a walkable commercial area on Main Street. It's funded by the Massachusetts Department of Housing and Community Development. And I just would like to thank Senator Tarr and Representative Jones for their advocacy on the town's behalf. The second item is that the town's 2015 special collections events have been announced by the DPW. The information is on the website, but for the viewing public, the first events are the curbside collection of yard waste, which is scheduled to occur on Saturday, April 25th, and on Saturday, April 9th. There are a number of other events that are scheduled over the course of the season as well, and that's available on the town website. And that concludes my comments for this evening. Thank you.
Okay. Who wants to start?
I'll start by saying, no comment, all set. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Yule?
Well, I'll just say that they are accepting applications for the yard sale, the senior center. It's a good program.
Did my wife pay you to say that?
I'm sorry?
Did my wife pay you to say that?
Well, no, but I've been pushing my wife because we've got a house full of stuff that we want to get rid of. So, but they are going to have it. It's at the end of April, but the applications have to be in by the 10th in order to be on the
map.
On the map and in the newspaper, I believe.
And actually, I'm glad you mentioned it, because the requests were coming a little slow with the snow. No one was thinking about yard sales.
They're gonna start thinking very quickly now.
Yeah.
So, but again, you go to the senior center, you can get an application. You can actually pull an application off the town website by going to the Council on Aging.
And the
section.
signs on the street have little, I believe they have little phone numbers or some contact information you can pull off.
Is that, I
Or
don't know.
maybe it's in the local businesses anyway.
Yeah, I think it's in the local businesses. So, but it's a great opportunity to clean things out.
Mhm.
Thank you, that's it.
Joe?
I have nothing tonight, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Yeah,
Wow.
and I honestly, I went through this really quick. I didn't see that last part until you just showed it.
I just want to comment that, this is really a pretty tight budget year. And there's been a lot of effort on the financial planning team meeting to try to fulfill the needs of the school department and also maintain the town services. And I want to thank our town administrator, for doing such a great job on the budget and leaving us with, a few decisions, not like 100 decisions to make in the next few weeks so that we can get this thing tied up. As I mentioned earlier, we are meeting with Alex Vispoli and Dan, I can't even remember his names because he was...
Kowalski, something like that?
Kowalski, yeah. And Buzz. Joe, you gonna make it tomorrow?
Yes.
Okay. So maybe we could chat briefly after we brief
Sure.
the meeting. And with the intent of trying to bring this thing to some conclusion, maybe. I had coffee with Alex last week, and just wanted to make sure that what Mike had sent over to Buzz, that if he had any questions on it, we went over it. There was no negotiation or anything, just laid out what was presented. I think everybody's got a copy of that. So hopefully we'll make some progress tomorrow. They've had a board change, they had an election, and they...
John Pasquale? No.
No, he's not back yet,
I know, I
evidently. He wasn't there. One of their long-term members actually didn't get reelected. I also found out, although they've had their reorg meeting, Dan is still the chair until their town meeting.
Oh, is that how it works?
So they do it a little differently. They, at their a week ago Monday, I get it right, yeah, a week ago Monday's meeting, I did watch it. They did bring up, they had a little bit of a discussion of the water and the water rates, but it was more tied to their capital plan and in terms of what I guess what their water superintendent was proposing for an increase this coming year, which he said publicly 5%, and then mentioned that 5% the next couple of years and maybe even higher. The board questioned it. They had $2.4 million in their retained earnings in their water, and that they had, I think out of that, they were taking about $100,000 applied to the budget for whatever, and partially maybe stabilization of water rates. So in order to cover the capital costs that he was trying to cover, they needed $400,000 total. And I think the board was leaning toward taking that out of the stabilization fund rather than raise the water rates. Although they didn't make a final decision, what I did garner from the discussion was that they want to keep about a 20% retained earnings based on their operating budget, I gather. and that by taking $400,000 out, they would have still met the 20%. But there was no decision made at that point, and then the meeting went on to something else. So that's the information I have. I think anyone that's interested in watching that meeting, it's probably now on their, on Andover TV, they stream it, but they also have available for watching some of their previous meetings. It takes a week or two for it to get up there. And that's all I have to say.
Move to adjourn.
Do I hear a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?